Chapter 652. Be careful. At this time, Susie's voice sounded in Ji Bin's ears. He looked up and found that the huge demon was already standing in front of him, its ferocious face full of murderous intent. Ji Bin took a step back in horror. In the face of a powerful demon, the only thought in his mind was to run, but he found that his body could not move. His heart was trembling, and so was his hand that was holding the sword. Then, with a clang, the sword in his hand that was emitting the light of a saint artifact fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. Ji Bin's face was ashen. At this time, he had completely lost the will to resist. At this time, the huge demon had already raised its fist high and smashed it down on the defenseless Ji Bin. Boom! The huge fist smashed down, and the earth trembled violently. A large pit appeared on the ground, and smoke filled the air, but Ji Bin was nowhere to be seen. The one who saved Ji Bin was none other than Shea. She casually threw Ji Bin to the ground like a sandbag. At this time, Ji Bin seemed to have lost his soul. He neither expressed thanks nor gratitude for Shea's actions. I still overestimated you. Shea glanced at him and said lightly, I didn't expect the strong undead to be so weak. You don't understand. Ji Bin turned his head, not daring to meet Shea's mocking eyes. You have never lived in the undead main plane, maybe. Shea also turned her face away. For me, living in the undead main plane is not something to be envious of. After saying that, she turned her horse and disappeared from Ji Bin's sight. The battle between the demon and the undead had reached its climax. The undead had done their best, but they were no match for the demon. Except for the abyss skeletal dragon, all the undead creatures were killed by the terrifying demon as soon as they were summoned. The undead could not hold on for much longer. Susie finally could not hold on and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her soul power had been pushed to the limit. Susie, Miss Susie. Susie's injury caused the subordinates to cry out in alarm. They abandoned the battle and gathered around. Don't bother about me. Susie wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and pushed the person away. He said hurriedly, Quick, go and save Nico. Calamity God's staff must not fall into the hands of the demons. At this time, Vitala's blood-red eyes finally locked onto Nicole. From the beginning to the end, she had not forgotten the mission given to her by Hell. Obtain the Calamity God staff. Vitala grinned and approached Nicole step by step. You don't come over. Nicole was scared out of her wit. Her small body trembled as she retreated. In front of the powerful demon, she was like a pitiful chick. Vitala was filled with violence and bloodthirst. Her mind had been eroded by the devil seed, and she had lost her basic rationality and the ability to talk. All that was left was murderous intent. Kill. After defeating a group of undead, Vitala's killing intent rose to its peak. At this time, she was an out-and-out killing machine. Fist of destruction. Vitali didn't even bother interrogating Nicole. Instead, he threw a punch at her. It's over. Nicole sighed in her heart. She knew that she couldn't avoid it. She closed her eyes tightly. Undead Overture, Death Elegy. At this time, Nicole heard a familiar voice. This voice had the power to calm people's hearts. The wind and clouds between heaven and earth suddenly changed. An earth-shaking aura of death suddenly erupted. The world was filled with the smell of despair. Like the sound of nature, the melodious music filled the entire battlefield. This is, Susie's body trembled. A trace of joy that hadn't appeared in a long time appeared on her face. The 4th chapter of the Book of Death, Death Elegy. At this moment, Ron raised the dragon bone staff high up and waved it wildly. A powerful death energy filled the entire space, causing countless creatures to tremble. Like black stones, hard blocks were spread out, forming a hardened ground. The death energy continued to spread. Ka, the hardened black earth trembled, and countless undead creatures scrambled out of the ground. The skeleton warrior stood up. The skeleton magus stood up. The terror knight stood up. The ghouls stood up. The powerful abyssal bone dragon and the numerous gargoyles roamed the sky. An army of several tens of thousands of undead suddenly appeared, covering the small hill. Countless white skeletons continuously surged. Their deep eye sockets were scarlet red as they let out heart-shaking roars. My injuries. At this time, Susie discovered that her injuries had miraculously healed. Apart from her, all the injured undead had been healed. Undead Overture, an eternal war song. Ron stopped playing and coldly raised his head. His eyes were emotionless. His body emitted a powerful and frightening death energy. At this moment, Ron waved his hand and softly said, "Kill! Roar!" Several tens of thousands of undead simultaneously let out a roar that pierced the sky. Then, the earth shook as all the undead charged at Vitala. Their momentum was great, shaking the entire world. Vitala was abnormally calm in the face of the undead. She coldly snorted and gently moved her right hand, raising a finger. Cloak. A wisp of black flame appeared on her fingertip, gently jumping like a mischievous elf. A strange smile appeared on Vitala's face. At this time, her eyes shone brightly. Her finger suddenly drew a line, and the destructive power on her body burst out like a mountain. Destruction of heaven and earth. In an instant, time and space seemed to have stopped. Between heaven and earth, only a dazzling light was left. Boom! The boundless black flame surged up like a surging river, splashing up waves more than 10 feet high. The huge flame wave continued to pour down, destroying everything in its path. What? Ron was completely stunned. His eyes widened. The tyrannical power in front of him made him feel that he could not contend with it. For the first time, he truly felt the gap between him and his opponent. It was the gap between heaven and earth, the true power of a powerhouse in the realm of the gods. Vitala, who had transformed into a demon, had a powerful destructive power. Her strength even surpassed the strongest fairy dragon in the Noah continent. The powerful destructive power could destroy heaven and earth, sweeping through everything. In the roar like a huge wave hitting a reef, tens of thousands of undead were swallowed up by the black flame in an instant. They did not even have the chance to struggle or howl before they were burned to ashes by the powerful black flame. How could this be? Susie, who originally had a glimmer of hope for Ron, was now in complete despair. Her eyes widened in shock, and her body trembled violently due to fear. This was just a demon, but she had such strength. What about the thousands of demons in hell? Susie did not dare to think about it. For the first time, she truly felt the horror of hell. Defeated. We're finished. Ron's mind was blank. His body was sent flying by the black flame wave. He floated quietly in the air, and fell heavily to the ground, but it was as if he did not feel anything. He could finally understand Gibbon's despair. It was a feeling that was so powerful that it was suffocating. Sure enough, it's still not enough. Gibbon murmured. I knew it. It's impossible to win. It's impossible. Facing a demon, a powerhouse from the sacred domain with destructive power, a group of powerhouses from the sacred domain had no chance of winning. Even if their strength had reached the peak of the sacred domain and was only a thin line away from a powerhouse from the sacred domain. But that thin line was the gap between heaven and earth. Clang! Clang! After the powerful destruction wreaked havoc, the entire death impasse was no longer in its original state. The only remaining ruins had completely disappeared. The ground was scorched black, and a fiery red color could be seen on the ground that had been burned to ashes. Dead, all dead. All the undead creatures were burned to ashes. Even the powerful abyss bone dragon was no exception. Encountering the powerful Vitala, their appearance was destined to be a tragedy. There were also many goblins who were burned to death. They hid underground and were roasted alive by the black flame. In that blow, all the undead were swept in, including Susie, Gibbon, and Shea. At this moment, everyone was injured. Those who were weaker died on the spot. The demon Vitala flapped a pair of black wings on her back and slowly descended. Looking at everything that was destroyed in front of her, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Resistance was futile. The power of a demon was unparalleled. At this moment, Vitala was completely controlled by the demon seed. She had turned into a violent, bloodthirsty demon. Only destruction and slaughter could make her happy. Vitala looked at Ron and then at Susie. She smiled contemptuously. She turned her head and her gaze finally fell on Nicole. "Hand it over," Vitala spoke slowly. Due to the gradual loss of consciousness, her language ability and thinking were limited. She could only speak a few simple syllables. Nicole was stared at by the demon's eyes. She seemed to be unable to move and trembled in fear. "Nicole, don't." At this moment, Ron's voice came from not far away. He struggled to get up but fell heavily to the ground. Seeing this scene, Susie and Gibbon shed tears of regret. They knew what it meant to hand over the Calamity God's staff. Unfortunately, they had done their best. Vitala frowned. She looked at Ron contemptuously and then looked away. To her, these people's strength could not threaten her at all. Death was a matter of time. She did not care at all. "Do you want to die?" Seeing that Nicole did not move, Vitala finally became impatient. She took a step forward, her eyes full of murderous intent. I'll take, you don't come over." Nicole seemed to be frightened. Her trembling hand reached for the necklace on her neck. Seeing that Nicole was willing to cooperate, Vitala stopped. "Hand it over, your life." Vitala's voice was intermittent, but everyone understood what she meant. However, they also knew that this condition was limited to Nicole and did not include them. The undead were in complete despair. The Calamity God's staff, the symbol of the highest power in the Scourge army, would eventually fall into the hands of Hell. The demons of Hell who had the Calamity God's staff could play with the billions of undead in the undead world in the palm of their hand. Nicole opened the mechanism of the necklace and used her spiritual sense to connect with the Calamity God's staff. Chapter 653. What Nicole touched was the corpse of a small, cat-like creature. A dimensional beast. Legend had it that the corpse of a dimensional beast could allow one to comprehend the mysteries of space and directly move to another dimension. However, legends were legends after all. No one knew if the corpse of a dimensional beast really had such an effect. But Nicole knew. Although Nicole did not comprehend the mysteries of space, she knew that the dimensional beast had something that could teleport. That was its magic core. The mysteries of space were all hidden in the dimensional beast's magic core. The dimensional beast could teleport multiple times, but unfortunately, a dead dimensional beast's magic core could only be used once. Once was enough for Nicole. Nicole used her sharp nails to cut open the dimensional beast's head and carefully dug out the small magic core. She held it in her hand. "Hurry up," Vitala was already impatient. She urged, and the black flames on her body suddenly exploded. Almost done." Nicole used her words to calm the demon while secretly injecting energy into the dimensional beast's magic core. Calamity God's staff. Ron's heart was already close to despair. The scene that he did not want to see the most had finally happened. The Calamity God's staff that symbolized the highest authority in the Calamity army was about to fall into the hands of the Hell demon. However, it would be the same for anyone else. No one could resist all of this. Vitala's strength was just too strong. The Calamity God's staff was about to be in her hand. Vitala's face revealed a smile, but her demonic face became even more sinister. At this moment, Nicole was already prepared. She took a deep breath and her gaze turned cold. "For you." As she spoke, Nicole threw something out. It was an antique wooden box that was half the height of a person. The wooden box tumbled in the air and flew towards Vitala in a parabola. Vitala was overjoyed. She flapped her wings, and her huge body suddenly rushed out, bringing with it a powerful wave of air. In the blink of an eye, Vitala had already rushed to the front of the wooden box. Before the box landed, she stretched out her thick hands and grabbed it. Gotcha! The hard wooden box was like a fragile egg in Vitala's hand. It was broken, and the items inside the wooden box suddenly burst out. Vitala was stunned. Ron was stunned. Everyone was stunned. It was shiny and black. No one would have thought that the small box didn't contain the Calamity Divine staff, but countless black crystal coins. Thousands of black crystal coins fell to the ground with crisp sounds like mercury spilling onto the ground. Even the brutal demon Vitala had a greedy look in her eyes when she saw the huge wealth in front of her. It was this greed that made her hesitate in her actions. Now, at this time, Nicole gritted her teeth and suddenly took out the alien beast's magic core. She raised it high and crushed it. Boom! The demonic core that was as fragile as glass shattered. Countless powders turned into ice shards and scattered down. Immediately after, a gentle light appeared and enveloped Nicole's entire body, turning it into a halo. Town return scroll? All of the undead were stupefied. They never imagined that Nicole would actually have such an idea. Their faces lit up with joy, but very quickly, their hearts sank. A return scroll was simply useless in front of a powerhouse of the realm of the gods. Spatial imprisonment. Vitala's reaction was extremely fast. At this moment, she immediately opened her domain. A powerful god's domain power erupted. Black flames spread out like a wave, sealing the surrounding space. However, Nicole's spatial energy wasn't affected at all. The light of her spatial energy grew brighter and brighter. She was about to teleport. How can this be? How can this be? Vitala's heart was roaring. She never thought that her powerful destruction domain wouldn't be able to seal the opponent's spatial energy. The situation had changed far beyond her expectations. No, this isn't a town return scroll. This is a space heart. This is a space heart refined from an alien beast's magic core. Susie cried out involuntarily. The so-called space heart was another name for the alien beast's magic core. Damn it! How could she have such a thing? Gibbon said through gritted teeth. However, at this moment, his heart was inexplicably relieved. No matter what, the Calamity God's staff wouldn't fall into the hands of the infernal demons. Ron was lying on the ground, his black robe covered in blood. Seeing this scene, a gratified smile appeared on his blood-stained face. Great, Nicole. You did well. Shea leaned half of her body against the wall, her eyes filled with tears of excitement. Nicole, who was shrouded in spatial energy, was filled with a divine aura. At this moment, she was like a savior in everyone's eyes. Vitala was stunned. Everything that happened in front of her was far beyond her expectations. Nicole's pair of beautiful eyes swept across the huge demon, then fixed on Ron. She slowly opened her mouth. Ron, Shea, thank you very much for accompanying me here and fulfilling one of my wishes, Nicole said and bowed slightly. But now I'm sorry. I have to leave because... Nicole paused and straightened her back, her gaze resolute as she looked forward. I have a more important mission. The Calamity God's staff must not fall into the hands of the infernal demons, because it will bring disaster to the entire undead main plane. Ron looked at Nicole with a complicated expression. Nicole looked at Susie and Gibbon and said, Sister, brother-in-law, please forgive me for not being able to hand the Calamity God's staff over to you. Before my father left, he told me that the Calamity God's staff must be handed over to a peerless expert who cultivates in the power of the undead. Only he can lead the Calamity army to rise again and regain its glory. After Nicole said this, the surrounding halo and the spatial energy spiraling around her weakened. The teleportation to another plane had entered its final stage. At this moment, Vitala was already anxious. She did not expect that she would be tricked at the last moment. At this moment, the wings on her back flapped violently, and the black flames on her huge fists burned brightly. One could vaguely see purple lightning flowing through them. Die! Vitala roared and pounced forward. She raised her fist high and punched at Nicole with all her might. Nicole's lips curled into a bitter smile. She knew that if she left now and left everyone behind, it would be very unkind. But Nicole had no choice because she had a more important mission. This mission was to find a peerless expert to be the true successor of the Calamity Army in the undead main plane to regain its glory. Then, my friends, goodbye. After Nicole finished speaking, she bowed deeply. At the same time, Vitala's fist with black flames had already arrived. At this moment, the halo on Nicole's body shone brightly, illuminating the surrounding space. With a swoosh, just as Vitala's fist was about to hit Nicole, her figure disappeared along with the light. Boom! 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 Vitala's attack missed, and the powerful destructive force hit the small mountain behind her. The earth trembled and the mountain shook. Wherever the light passed, half of the mountain was flattened. In an instant, the entire place was silent. Everyone was stunned. Chapter 654. Nicole left with an even more important mission. In fact, she knew that there was no use in staying here. She would only be a burden to everyone. In the end, she still had to hand over the Calamity God's staff. Although Ron and the others understood this, they could not accept it emotionally. Ron's gaze fell on Vitala. Vitala was still in an attacking posture, but her huge body was trembling non-stop. Her face was distorted, and her blood-red eyes were overflowing with killing intent. It was obvious that she was extremely angry. In front of the furious demon, no one dared to breathe loudly, afraid that they would be targeted by the demon. Sure enough, Vitala let out a despairing howl. The howl was filled with extreme anger and unwillingness. Immediately after, a powerful black flame burst out from her body. The battlefield that had already calmed down was once again stirred up by a strong whirlwind. The howl shook the sky, and a powerful destructive force pierced through the sky. At this moment, Vitala had exploded. She punched out, and a powerful destructive force broke through the sky. It directly bombarded a small mountain not far away, causing a powerful explosion. Boom! 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 Vitala punched out again and again. The black flame on her body flourished, and a powerful destructive force wantonly destroyed everything in its path. Everywhere it went, everything was turned into ruins. Countless rocks rolled down, and several tons of boulders were swept into the air. In her rage, Vitala caused great damage to this uninhabited land of death. At this moment, Vitala's heart was filled with extreme anger and unwillingness. The Calamity God's staff was once about to fall into her hands, but in the end it was all for naught. How could she not be angry? She was venting the surging anger in her heart. The entire land of death was turned upside down by her. Ron, Shea, Bin, Susie, and the others trembled under Vitala's terrifying power. A violent demon was so terrifying. Be careful. At this time, Ron shouted and pulled Susie. At the same time, a huge boulder weighing dozens of tons fell at their feet with a bang. At the critical moment, Ron gave up the idea of going against her. Regardless of his serious injuries, he saved Susie's life. Now, he was on the same side as Susie and Gibbon. In any case, they were undead. Thank you, Sue. She was still in shock. Seeing that it was Ron, she was a little surprised, but she still politely thanked him. Nothing. Ron forced a smile. At this time, Shea also limped over. Although her injuries had already recovered, she couldn't replenish the soul force she had consumed. Shea stared at the rampaging demon in the distance and sighed. This guy is crazy. Then let's run, Susie said nervously. Although the undead focused on the cultivation of the soul, even if the physical body was destroyed, they could use the soul to be reborn. But Susie knew that against an opponent of Vitala's level, she could definitely destroy her body and soul. Ron smiled bitterly. Can we still escape? As if feeling the despair in Ron and the others' hearts, Vitala stopped and turned around. Her blood-red eyes stared at them fiercely. I'm going to kill you, kill you! The furious Vitala looked at Ron and the others with a strong killing intent in her eyes. She spat out a vague sentence. She wanted to vent all the anger in her heart on those undead. Ron looked at Vitala's blood-red eyes and his heart gradually sank. He knew that he couldn't pass this hurdle in front of him. In the face of this hopeless gap in strength, the only thing they could do was close their eyes. At this time, the wings on Vitala's back suddenly opened. With a strong wind, she rushed toward Ron and the others. White bone shield. Absolute defense. Ron, Susie, and Shea shouted in unison. They raised their last resistance, although they knew in their hearts that resistance was futile. Boom. Sure enough, under the powerful strength of the demon Vitala, the shields that the three of them condensed with soul power exploded. They flew up like kites with broken strings and fell heavily to the ground. Kill you! Kill you! Vitala's huge body kept stepping down, and a lot of smoke rose from her body. Under her feet was Ron's thin and weak body. Ron, who was being trampled under the demon's feet, was completely unrecognizable. All the bones in his body exploded like fireworks, and he couldn't even let out a cry. At this moment, the furious Vitala was staring at Ron. Nicole ran away, so she vented all her anger on Ron. Shea was anxious. She didn't care about the gap between her and the demon. She roared and rushed forward. Susie also began to summon the strongest abyssal bone dragon. Get out of my way! Vitala shouted, and the flames on her body exploded. Shea screamed and was sent flying. At the same time, she attacked the two abyssal bone dragons summoned by Susie. No. We can win. No. Win. Ji-bin was trembling all over. He looked at everything in front of him in horror, and his teeth were chattering because of fear. Unless I summon a frost dragon, I can still fight. The abyssal skeletal dragon is too weak. As if to prove Gibbon's words, in just a moment, the two abyssal bone dragons exploded under Vitala's fist. Vitala, with her strength in the divine realm, was like an unstoppable war chariot. She was invincible. It's over. The atmosphere of death hung over everyone's head. Everyone's heart was filled with despair. Ron, what happened to you? The seriously injured Shea got up with difficulty and quickly crawled to Ron's side. Looking at Ron's miserable state, she couldn't help but cry. At this moment, all the bones in Ron's body were shattered. He could only breathe. His body was also trampled into the ground by the huge demon. He couldn't move at all. Hearing Shea's voice, the seriously injured Ron forced his eyes open. His swollen face revealed a desperate smile. Shea. Yeah, maybe. I'm going to die, Ron said with difficulty. But today, I'm very happy, although I still don't know what happened. But the Calamity God's staff was taken away. It didn't fall into the hands of the demons. As for Nicole, he took a deep breath, paused for a moment, and then continued. You must not blame her. Blame her? Is it still useful? Hearing this, Shea smiled sadly. If I knew that things would turn out like this, I would have killed her earlier. What Calamity God's staff? What Lich King? What Calamity Army of the main plane of the dead? They have nothing to do with me. I don't care about them. In my heart, there's only you. As Shea spoke, she looked at the seriously injured Ron. Her red eyes were filled with tenderness. Ron, do you think, if you die, I'll still be alive? Don't forget, we've already made a contract in front of God. Shea paused for a moment and smiled slightly. Chapter 655. Ron's eyes regained a trace of life. Shea knew that it was the final radiance of the setting sun. Ron forced a smile as black blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. Shea, actually, you haven't changed at all, you're just being cold to me on purpose. Shea's face turned red. You already know? Ron nodded with difficulty. At this moment, Ron felt a warmth at the corner of his mouth. Shea gently kissed Ron's cold lips. At this moment, the two of them kissed passionately as if they were the only existence in the world. After a while, their lips reluctantly parted. Shea smiled embarrassedly and lowered her voice. But it's a pity that we're both going to die. Are we going to die? Ron sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that he didn't die in the Noah continent but in another plane, a place called the Snow Orchid continent. At this moment, Ron thought of Aurora, Kadena, Basara, and Lin. Perhaps if he really died they would be very sad. Thinking of death, Ron felt a sense of relief. Anyway, he had tried his best. If he died, then so be it. At this moment, the demon Vitala's blood-red eyes stared at Susie, the necromancer's sacred magus, who still had a certain amount of fighting power. You don't come over. At this moment, all of Susie's abyss bone dragons were destroyed. She was alone. Seeing the demon approaching step by step, her face turned pale and she retreated in fear. Hee, the demon smiled. His sinister face became more and more terrifying. His huge wings flapped and his body rushed forward like a phantom. In just a moment, he rushed in front of Susie and grabbed her like a chicken. You let go of me. Susie struggled desperately in the demon's hands but couldn't break free from the demon's big hands. At this moment, her beautiful face turned purple. Shrouded by the shadow of death, her body trembled with fear. Susie! Ron and Shea also noticed this and cried out in alarm. Unfortunately, they were too heavily injured to do anything. You undead, demon Vitala's breathing became heavy, and her blood-red eyes were filled with brutality. She grinned, revealing 2 pairs of sharp canine teeth. They all deserve to die. Vitala roared. At this moment, she moved. Her thick claws slowly rose and grabbed Susie's delicate arm. She exerted a little force. Ah! Susie let out a heart-wrenching scream, the sharp sound echoing in the land of death. Her arm had been torn off, and the white bones of her broken left arm could be seen. Susie almost fainted from the pain. Although the undead cultivated their own souls, the pain from the physical body was still unbearable. With a plop sound, the lotus-like snow-white hand was thrown to the ground. The overflowing blood dyed the ground red. Vitala smiled with satisfaction. She did the same and tore off Susie's right arm, followed by the pair of beautiful and slender thighs. Ron lay on the ground and watched this cruel and brutal scene. At this moment, his eyes were blood-red, his nails had sunk deep into his flesh, and his body trembled violently with anger. Demon! Demon! Shea also gritted her teeth. She couldn't wait to rush up and tear the cruel and brutal demon into pieces, if she could still move her body. This terrifying demon was no longer simply killing, but seeking the pleasure of tyranny in killing. The demon seed had deeply integrated with Vitala and was gradually devouring her mind. At this moment, she was no longer under control and had become a powerful and cruel monster. If the noble and beautiful Princess Vitala of the Sea Tribe could see her now, she would definitely regret swallowing the demon seed. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. After a while, Susie's hands and feet were broken, and the empty necromancer robe hung powerlessly under her body, constantly fluttering in the wind. At this moment, she couldn't even speak. Her body was twitching, and her blue lips kept trembling, like a broken doll. At this time, Susie groaned. Her broken body was thrown to the ground by the demon, like a wriggling mass of meat. The land of death was full of a sad atmosphere. The demon's scarlet eyes kept sweeping around. The survivors lowered their heads, shivering, and dared not look at her. Demon Vitala looked at her masterpiece on the ground and smiled with satisfaction. At this time, she took a step forward and stepped on Susie's broken body with her huge foot. Susie let out a weak groan. She struggled a few times and closed her eyes in resignation. Just as Vitala was about to end Sushi's life, her heart suddenly trembled, and she quickly turned around. With a loud bang, a powerful soul force erupted. Who dared to make a move under the demon's power? The faint black fog dispersed, revealing the figure inside. The figure inside the black fog was clad in white bone armor. He held a shiny two-handed sword in his hand. Clearly, it was a sacred artifact. A pair of huge bone wings spread out from his back like a bone dragon, occupying more than half of his body. Ron and Shea were stunned. It was none other than the necromancer sword Saint Gibbon, who had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain. At this moment, he was holding the two-handed sword tightly and slashing at the demon's arm, but he found that he couldn't cut it at all. Gibbon floated in the air, and his face was filled with intense fear. His body kept trembling. Seeing that his wife was about to die at the hands of the demon, he rushed forward without hesitation. When Gibbon stood in front of the demon, he realized how stupid he was. The difference in strength between the two couldn't be measured at all. In the eyes of the demon, he was like a defenseless child. "Haha, you coward! You actually dare to attack me?" Demon Vitala sneered and slowly turned around. At this moment, her eyebrows twitched, and a bone-chilling cold aura was emitted from her body. "If you don't resist, you won't die. Why don't you weaklings understand?" Vitala roared angrily. His huge fist was covered in black flames as he suddenly struck out and hit Gibbon's soft stomach with a bang. Ah! Gibbon bent down in pain. He raised his head, and in the next moment, he saw something even more terrifying. Destruction flame. The black destruction flame wrapped around Gibbon's body like a snake. At this moment, he was burning like a man on fire. The destruction flame burned Gibbon until he rolled on the ground and screamed. He wanted to extinguish the black flames on his body, but unfortunately, his actions were futile. The black flames seemed to have magic. Once he touched them, he could not get rid of them. Susie's physical body was injured, but the destruction flame also burned his soul. Gibbon's screams echoed throughout the battlefield. It was a scream from the depths of his soul. The burned muscles sizzled, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of meat. The pitiful goblin boy was lucky to survive under the demon's powerful attack. At this moment, he buried his head deep in the goblin prophet's arms, revealing an extremely terrified gaze. "Grandpa Prophet, what should we do?" The goblin boy's voice was sobbing. The demon's attack just now was like a catastrophe. His parents were blown to ashes in an instant, and they did not even have time to scream. "I don't know, child." The old goblin prophet hugged the little boy tightly. His wrinkled face was full of tears. "But I believe that the great God will protect us. Definitely, let us pray," the goblin prophet said in despair. At this moment, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years. As the prophet of the goblins, this was the first time he had entrusted his life to fate. The demon laughed loudly. Her laughter was filled with cruelty. At this moment, she licked her lips lightly and looked for her next target. Soon, Vitala's gaze fell on Ron, who was trapped in the pit, and she smiled coldly. "Not good." Ron's heart trembled and his heart sank. Pung! Vitala's body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. The next moment, she appeared in front of Ron. So fast! Ron was dumbfounded. Looking at the huge figure in front of him, he realized in horror that the demon in front of him was stronger than before. "Her strength has increased tremendously. Damn it, how can I live?" Ron gritted his teeth as he thought. The demon Vitala looked quietly at Ron, who was lying in the pit, and laughed coldly. Ron raised his head with difficulty and looked at her calmly. His eyes shone with determination. "That's right, it's you," the demon Vitala laughed. "I remember now. You're the one who ruined my plans time and time again. You're the one who prevented me from obtaining the Calamity Divine's staff time and time again, making me unable to answer to Her Highness." The demon's tone gradually rose, and it was obvious that she was angry. At this moment, her speech had become more nimble, and her strength had increased. This meant that the demon seed had completely merged with Vitala, and there was no distinction between them. I'll fight it out with you." Seeing that the demon was about to attack Ron, Shea gritted her teeth and gathered her remaining strength. She grabbed the holy sword beside her and rushed over. She roared, and the sharp sword in her hand was full of flames. Looking at Shea rushing over, the demon Vitala's eyes flashed with contempt. She snorted coldly. "Get lost!" Vitala sent a flying kick at Shea, sending him flying far away. The other surviving undead looked at all this in horror. No one dared to step forward and intervene. Even their breathing became extremely light, for fear that they would accidentally attract the demon's attention. Shea rolled several times and fell heavily to the ground. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of black blood. She wanted to get up, but she fell far away. Shea raised her head. In an instant, her eyes widened. No. She saw Ron's broken body slowly rising in the demon's hands. She could even see the demon's grin. Perhaps he had experienced a lot of storms, or perhaps he had predicted his ending early on. Ron, who was mentally prepared, was always calm. "Very good attitude." The demon Vitala smiled. "Compared with that coward, your strength and courage are much better." "What do you want?" Ron asked slowly. His eyes never left the demon's ferocious and terrifying face. "I want to tell you. This game is over," Vitala said with a smile. "In the name of the god of destruction, I declare your death sentence." After the demon finished speaking, she roared like a beast. She swung her hand in a semicircle and threw Ron into the air. Ron's body was like a kite with a broken string, floating unconsciously. At this time, he clearly felt that a powerful destructive force was rapidly condensing on the demon's body. Ball of destruction. Vitala bent her 10 fingers into claws. Black gas quickly condensed and turned into a ball. The black ball, which was the size of a basketball, spun in Vitala's hand. Purple lightning constantly swam around the ball. "Go to hell!" Vitala roared and attacked Ron, who was constantly falling from the sky. The ball of destruction left a series of tracks in the air. The hot ball even burned the air. Ron's body fell. Below him was a broken wall. On the wall, a strange pattern was engraved. That was the Scourge's blood skull flag. Even after thousands of years, there was still no trace of it. The blood-red pattern was like a flame that was constantly jumping. No one noticed that the entire land of death had been destroyed by the demon. The surrounding area had been wiped out by the destructive force, including the entire temple. Only this broken wall still existed. It stood proudly like a monument with an unyielding will. Ron, Shea stood up and howled in despair, like an injured she-wolf in the night. Feeling the temperature in the air getting hotter and hotter, Ron smiled and slowly closed his eyes. At this time, the wall under Ron strangely lit up. What is this? Ron's heart skipped a beat. At this time, he only felt that his body was surrounded by a warm gas. The soul power in his body began to circulate rapidly. What's going on? Ron opened his eyes in shock. At this time, he felt that his body was no longer in pain. It was as if he had taken a bath. Every pore was filled with comfort. This is, the demon Vitala's fierce and cruel eyes opened wide. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. She took a step back in shock and trembled all over. What is this? Inexplicably, she felt a fear from the bottom of her heart. The sky darkened slightly. In the space connecting heaven and earth, a huge human figure appeared. This illusory figure was about a few 100 feet tall. It was many times larger than Vitala's demon body. Compared to this huge figure, the demon Vitala was so small. The huge figure was wearing a wide black robe and a crown symbolizing nobility on its head. It exuded an extraordinary aura. At this time, the huge illusory figure slowly opened its eyes and quietly stared at Vitala. The dark eyes shot out a sharp gaze that pierced into Vitala's heart. Chapter 656. Everyone was stunned as they looked at the giant figure in the air above the land of death. They couldn't suppress the shock on their faces. That giant figure was emitting a boundless aura of death. As if she felt something strange around her, Susie, who had her limbs torn off, opened her eyes and looked curiously at the giant figure. She felt an incomparably familiar aura from that figure. When Susie's gaze fell on the figure's face, her body couldn't help but tremble. Her face was filled with astonishment. "Father! It's the Lich King! Lord Lich King!" The undead all cried out in alarm. That's right, the tall and sturdy figure in the air was the commander of the Scourge of the Undead Plane, the highest ruler, the highest belief, the Lich King, Lord Hermes. Unfortunately, this wasn't Hermes himself, but a reflection in the air. It could be said that this was a trace of his will that he had left behind in the Snow Orchid continent. Under the Lich King, the undead all knelt down, their faces filled with excitement. Some even began to cry bitterly. In their hearts, the Lich King, Hermes, was a supreme existence. It's the Lich King. It really is the Lich King. The undead sword Saint Jibin lay on the ground, his eyes filled with disbelief. His body was covered in burns, and he looked like he had been fished out from a pile of charcoal. It seemed like he only had one last breath left. So that trace of familiar aura of death belonged to the Lich King. Jibin muttered. The Lich King really did come here. The Lich King! Ron slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that familiar face, his heart trembled. From that strange dream and what Lord Noah had said, who else could this man be but the Lich King? Why would the Lich King appear here? A big question mark appeared in Ron's heart. No, it's not Lord Lich King. It's just a wisp of Lord Lich King's soul. However, merely this strand of incomplete soul contained strength that was far beyond imagination. Compared to it, Ron's strength was merely a speck of dust in the vast galaxy. The ball of destruction that Vitara released to attack Ron disappeared without a trace after only one hit. The sudden appearance of the Lich King's broken soul caught the demon Vitala off guard. She still didn't understand what was going on. However, there were some things that she understood. The strength of this gigantic figure in the void was unimaginably powerful. "You. What exactly are you?" Vitara took a step back and stuttered. Compared to her previous ferocious and ruthless attitude, she was now more cautious. A sigh came from the void. The Lich King's gaze casually swept past the ferocious demon. He didn't stop and immediately looked at Ron. The Lich King's broken soul quietly stared at Ron. He didn't say anything, but a trace of sadness appeared in his deep eyes. Ron's heart trembled. He's looking at me. He's actually looking at me. Seeing that the Lich King was looking at him, Ron couldn't feel happy no matter what. The gaze that shot him was like a sharp sword that pierced into his heart. That gaze clearly contained intense disappointment. Yes, that's right, it was disappointment. It was the feeling of a parent who expected better from their child. Ron felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He didn't know why, but he was deeply hurt by this gaze. This kind of pain was heart-wrenching. "Kill her." At this time, a slightly magnetic voice sounded in Ron's mind. This voice contained a dignified aura, as if it was an order that couldn't be questioned. Ron understood that the "she" was referring to Vitara. Hearing the Lich King's order, Ron couldn't help but shake his head and bitterly smile. Kill Vitara. If he could really kill her, why would he wait until now? At this time, the demon Vitara below began to laugh. "Haha, I thought it was something else. It's just the broken soul of a powerhouse. You're actually pretending to be a god?" She could already see that the huge reflection in the void was just a broken soul. Kill her! At this time, the Lich King's order sounded in Ron's mind again. This time, his voice carried a trace of urgency and dissatisfaction. My apologies, Lich King. Please forgive me for not being able to do it. Ron honestly replied. She's a powerhouse of the divine realm. I'm not her opponent. Hearing Ron's words, the Lich King fell into a rare silence. He lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he lightly sighed. Vitara's body moved. She slowly opened the demon wings behind her back. The corner of her mouth slightly raised, revealing a trace of an evil smile as her body slowly rose into the air. Perhaps your original body is very powerful. Unfortunately, you're just a broken soul right now. Vitara coldly laughed. She was confident in dealing with a broken soul. The Lich King didn't respond. He didn't even look at the demon. It was as if he didn't care about her at all. He only silently looked at Ron, his eyes filled with worry as he pondered. Ron also calmly looked at the Lich King. He didn't understand why the Lich King had been paying attention to him ever since he appeared. Susie was the Lich King's daughter, but the Lich King didn't even look at her. Susie's face was filled with excitement. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to fly into her father's arms and cry to her heart's content. Right now, the Scourge's days in the undead main plane were very difficult. Bastard! With a boom, the demon Vitara's body exploded with large amounts of black flames accompanied by purple lightning. The destructive power surged and roared like the waves of the sea. At this moment, the demon Vitara was deeply enraged by the void figure's attitude. She roared, "You dare to ignore my existence? Very well. I'll make you pay the price." After speaking, Vitara's body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. This was the demon race's powerful skill, teleport. In the next moment, Vitara had already appeared beside the Lich King. She fiercely punched towards his chest. The powerful destructive power covered the sky and earth, destroying everything. In the land of death below, Shea struggled to stand up. She looked at the figure in the sky and muttered, "Ron, what is he doing?" In the sky above the land of death, Ron's figure silently floated. His consciousness was communicating with the Lich King's incomplete soul. "You're saying you want me to kill her?" The Lich King didn't say anything. He simply nodded his head. Ron was about to say something when he felt his body move. An unfamiliar power suddenly appeared. This was an extremely vast amount of soul energy. This soul energy was like a broken dam that slowly poured into his mind. At the same time, his body was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this moment, Ron felt that his body was surrounded by a warm aura. His mind was incomparably clear. Seeing his body continuously recovering, he looked at his hands in disbelief. His face was filled with joy. "Sir Lich King, you..." Ron didn't have time to react. At this moment, he felt a boom in his mind. A powerful energy once again poured into his mind. This is... Ron was completely shocked. This time, the energy that poured into his mind was none other than the God of Death. It was like a strand of God of Death. It was like a blade of grass that happily jumped in Ron's hand. The God of Death, the legendary power of the God of Death. Ron didn't know how the Lich King had the God of Death. Or was he a legendary god? The God of Death, holding the God of Death in his hand, Ron's face was filled with excitement. At this moment, the Lich King's middle-aged voice once again sounded in his mind. "Go kill her. I don't want to see any other demon." "Yes, Sir Lich King," Ron replied. He slowly raised his head and stared at the ferocious demon. He took a deep breath and slowly raised his arm. Ron raised his arm and made a throwing motion. His eyes revealed a powerful battle intent. God of Death! God of Death? All the undead below were dumbfounded. They looked at Ron with eyes full of respect. The god of death was the symbol of the supreme god of death. The black god of death quickly condensed into the shape of a bone spear. It was different from the usual bone spears. At this moment, the bone spear in Ron's hand was completely black and emitted a vast amount of god of death. Spear of death. Ron's eyes focused and firmly locked onto the demon Vitala. He clenched his teeth and threw the spear of death. Ah, what is this? God of death? God of death. When Ron condensed the spear of death, Vitala already felt that something was wrong. If her strength was the boundless sea, then the god of death was the vast galaxy. Vitala never thought that Ron would actually use the god of death. The huge figure behind him wasn't a god like she had expected, but a real god. The gap between a god and a god was like a chasm. No, seeing the spear of death flying towards her, Vitala was completely flustered. The powerful aura of death sealed the entire space, and a thick haze shrouded the demon Vitala's heart. Fist of destruction. In the face of the threat of death, Vitala was not willing to sit still and wait for death. She made up her mind and threw a punch at the spear of death. With a loud bang, the entire space shook. The power of destruction and the divine power of death. These two powerful forces launched a high-level confrontation at the pinnacle. Not good, run. When the undead saw this, they panicked and fled in all directions. The goblins also desperately drilled into the ground. If they were not careful, they would be swallowed by the powerful god of death. Fortunately, these loyal undead did not forget the seriously injured Gibbon and Susie and rescued them at the last moment. However, in just a breath's time, the winner was decided. The spear of death had already pierced deeply into Vitala's body. The power of destruction began to collapse under the powerful attack of the god of death. I'm impossible, Vitala shouted loudly and let out a desperate howl. I'm a demon. The strongest demon, the strongest in the snow orchid continent. How can I die? I won't die. Boom, boom, boom. The demon's huge body burst out with a glaring light. In that moment, the light illuminated the entire sky. The sky changed color, the earth shook, and even the space showed signs of cracking. The power of a god was terrifying. The light exploded again. Following the glaring light, the demon's body turned into countless pieces, decayed, disappeared, everything turned into nothingness. Boom, boom, boom. After a while, the chaotic space finally calmed down. The entire land of death seemed to have suffered a devastating blow. The huge shadow of the Lich King had disappeared. In the snow orchid continent, the Lich King only left behind a fragment of his soul. It was this fragment of soul that saved Ron and everyone's lives. Ron stood there quietly. The black necromancer's robe on his body fluttered in the wind. His calm face was filled with indifference. A powerful god, a demon with the power of destruction, under the attack of Ron's god of death, turned into ashes. The power of a god could not be resisted. Ron. Seeing that Ron was fine, Shea's heart trembled. She breathed a sigh of relief. Her body went soft and she almost fell. This difficult battle was finally over. It was over. Ron looked into the distance, let out a long sigh, and gently closed his eyes. Chapter 657. On the devastated land, the surviving goblins emerged from the ground. They poked their heads out and looked at their surroundings in shock. The undead gathered around, and some necromancers began to cast healing spells on Gibbon and Susie despite their serious injuries. Her limbs were broken, and she had lost a lot of blood. She was on the verge of death, but her soul was not injured at all and recovered quickly. But Gibbon was not so lucky. His soul had almost been burned away by the demon's flames of destruction, and he only had one last breath left. Even though the injuries on his body had been healed, he still looked listless. Under the necromancer's superb healing spells, Susie, Gibbon, and the rest stood up. Heal her too. Susie, who was looking around, saw the seriously injured Shea, and ordered her subordinates. This. Seeing that it was Shea who needed to be healed, the necromancer hesitated. He glanced at Gibbon and did not say anything. Although they both practiced necromancy magic, for these undead from the main plane, Ron and Shea were obviously not on the same side. Seeing that the necromancer did not move, Susie was angry. She glared and shouted, "What? Didn't you hear what I said? Cast healing spells on me right now." "Yes, Your Highness Susie." Seeing that Gibbon did not object, the necromancer had no choice but to do as he was told. As the necromancer's healing spell lit up, Shea stood up. Her body was as good as new. "Thank you." Shea bowed slightly and thanked the necromancer sincerely. The undead, who were once rivals, stood together in the face of the powerful and terrifying devil. Ron, who was in the sky, saw all of this. He secretly nodded, and his figure moved, slowly descending. Sushi looked at Ron and opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Ji-bin, on the other hand, turned his head away. He was arrogant and couldn't accept the fact that Ron was stronger than him. In the end, it was Sushi who spoke. "Ron, thank you very much for your help. If the Calamity Divine's staff had fallen into the hands of the Infernal Court, the consequences would have been unimaginable." Ron nodded. "It's nothing. I'm also one of the undead. It's my duty to protect the symbol of the Scourge's highest authority. We can't let it fall into the hands of hell. No matter what, I'm still very grateful for your help." She smiled and looked at Ron with a complicated expression. The Lich King, Susie's father, had indeed come to the Snow Orchid continent. He had left behind a fragment of his soul, but Susie didn't understand why his father's soul had passed on the last of his divine power of death to Ron. Why is it that out of everyone, only this human who practices necromancy has received the favor of the Lich King's remnant soul, and not us? A huge question mark appeared in the hearts of all the undead. She was the Lich King's daughter and the most powerful necromancer. She was also one of the noblest undead. Logically speaking, the Lich King should have given the last of his power to Sushi. Why would he give the powerful divine power of death to an outsider who had nothing to do with him? Ron was also pondering over this point. He also didn't understand why he had inexplicably received the inheritance of the Lich King's remnant power. Even though it was just a remnant of his power, it was still so powerful that it made people feel suffocated. In front of this power, the demons who possessed the power of destruction were instantly killed. Ron benefited from this. After the Lich King had personally used the divine power of death to transform him, he felt as if he had been reborn. This was an extremely mysterious feeling. After the influence of the divine power of death, his realm had greatly increased, and he had a deeper understanding of the profound meaning of the law of death. The undead looked at Ron with eyes full of envy. Perhaps this guy would advance to the divine realm soon. It had to be known that from the sacred domain onwards, every level of power was extremely difficult to advance. Some people, due to their limited talent, would be trapped in the sacred domain realm for tens of thousands of years. Just like that old holy necromancer. He was already a holy necromancer 10,000 years ago, but after 10,000 years, he still hadn't advanced to the realm of holy necromancer. One could imagine how difficult it was to advance in the profound meaning of the law of death. Damn it, why does it have to be this stinking brat? Why can't it be me? Ji-bin, on the other hand, stared at Ron with eyes full of jealousy. He clenched his fists tightly, and his heart was in turmoil. She sighed slightly, but she was feeling a little down. Their purpose in coming to the Shuolan continent was to find Nicole and seize the Calamity Divine's staff. However, they didn't get the Calamity Divine's staff, and Nicole was missing. She had lost many experts, and she didn't even know how to explain this to Ji-bin's father. At this moment, Sushi naturally wasn't in the mood to continue talking to Ron. She forced a smile and said, "If there's nothing else, then we'll be leaving." Goodbye, Your Excellency Ron. Your Excellency Shea. With that, she paused and glanced at Ron and Shea. Also, if you've thought it through, you can come to the Plague Legion in the undead main plane to find us. The Plague Legion will not mistreat experts with true strength. Sushi hurriedly said a few words and was about to leave. At this moment, Ron called out to them. Wait! At this moment, Ron bowed slightly and saluted. My apologies, everyone. May I ask a question? Hearing this, Sushi stopped in her tracks and turned around. She nodded. Ask away. Ron pondered for a moment and asked, I want to know, how is the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane now? At this moment, Ron understood a little. The legendary Lich King was the commander of the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane. He had established the Scourge Church in the Noah continent. The Calamity Legion in the main plane and the Scourge Church in the secondary plane were successors. Ron urgently wanted to know how the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane was after the disappearance of the Lich King. Calamity Legion? Hearing this, Sushi laughed at herself and shook her head. She answered, The Calamity Legion no longer exists in the undead main plane. What? Hearing this, Ron was shocked. His eyes widened. You mean the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane no longer exists? Yes. Susie nodded and sighed deeply. Since Father's death, the Scourge has been divided into dozens of legions, large and small. Each of them is in charge of an area, and they are constantly at war. Some of the legions are even controlled by other powerful forces. In short, the main plane of the undead is now a mess. Ron was shocked. He had thought that the situation would be very serious, but the reality was much more serious than he had imagined. At this moment, his heart could not help but beat wildly. The Calamity Legion no longer existed. The blood-red skull flag that symbolized invincibility and invincibility. It was the symbol of the Calamity Legion that caused fear in the main plane. It had fallen with the death of the Lich King. Is this the result we want? Ron thought about this question. So, this is the reason why we want the Calamity Divine Staff. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. It was G-Bean who had interrupted and said coldly, My father, the Dreadlord, was once the Lich King's right-hand man. Ever since the Lich King died, he had been running between various forces. As the successor of the Lich King, he had the ambition to unify the entire undead main plane and revive the dead Calamity Legion. But it's a pity. You've ruined all of this. G-Bean glared at Ron, his eyes full of hatred. At this moment, he blamed everything on Ron. Don't blame Ron. Maybe some things are fated. Sushi sighed and tugged at her husband. Forget it, let's go. Humph. G-Bean snorted unhappily. He looked at Ron unwillingly and turned to leave. He did not want to stay here for a moment longer. Wait. Seeing that they were about to leave, Ron stopped them and said loudly, I have one last question. Is the Lich King really dead? Sushi's face darkened. She stopped and looked back at Ron. She slowly nodded. How is this possible? The demon seed's aura has disappeared. In another main plane of hell, a female demon sat on a throne in the corner of a luxurious palace. She gritted her teeth as she spoke. Below her sat a few demons. They were all tall and strong, and their faces were ferocious. The Calamity Divine Staff has also left that continent. Bastards, what are those merfolk doing? Damn it, they all deserve to die. The demon princess roared. At this moment, a red-haired demon said, That's right. Those merfolk are incompetent. We should send an army to the Snow Orchid continent and kill them all. Your Highness, you mustn't. Another purple-haired demon was shocked and immediately jumped out to stop her. Our army is under great pressure on the Eastern Front. I believe that sending an army to conquer a secondary plane is not a wise decision. Hearing that demon's words, the demon princess quickly calmed down. She thought carefully and nodded. That's right. Now is not the time to send an army to this secondary plane. Our current priority is the war on the Eastern Front. This secondary plane is not a big problem. Yes, Your Highness. The purple-haired demon let out a sigh of relief and said, other than the war on the Eastern Front, we still have the matter of the Great Commander. As long as we can find the Great Commander, the war on the Eastern Front will naturally be resolved. That's right. The demon princess raised her head. Her face was cold. She stood up and said in a clear voice, let's put the matter of the merfolk aside for now. These inferior races. They are a classic example of taking benefits but not doing anything. If it weren't for us, with their weak strength, would they be able to become the superior race of that secondary plane? Sooner or later, I will settle the score with them, the demon princess said fiercely. Her eyes revealed a deep killing intent. Those incompetent fellows don't deserve to live in this world. Chapter 658. A blue breeze blew across the plains, and Xiao Chao shyly lowered her head. The wide plains were soft and smooth like satin. After a while, a powerful aura appeared from the depths of the sky. In an instant, the wind and clouds began to gather. The powerful aura continued to spread, and the sky gradually darkened. It was as if a large net had been opened between the heavens and the earth, covering everything in the surroundings. What's going on? Why did the sky suddenly become dark? Aura, such a powerful aura. What is it? Did a strong person from the sacred domain descend? The nearest city, Undercity, also felt the strong throbbing. On the bustling streets, magic lamps lit up one by one. Everyone looked at the sky in shock, their faces filled with fear. Clang, clang, clang. The funeral bell of the Scourge Church's main altar rang out, and it echoed throughout Undercity. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Undercity became chaotic. Countless soldiers rushed to the streets and directly activated Level 1 alert. They held their weapons in their hands and were ready for battle. The undead canopy rose, and Undercity was covered in fog. What's going on? Where are the enemies? The generals of the various legions quickly rushed over with their troop. They were fully armed and riding on tall skeletal horses. They gathered together and kept whispering to each other, but they did not see a single shadow of the enemy. The aura in the air became thicker, and it was as heavy as a boulder, pressing down on everyone's heart. This feeling was suffocating. Let's go find Lady Vivian, someone said, and this suggestion immediately received the support of all the legions under the Scourge Church. Before the situation was clear, it was necessary to seek orders from their superiors. On the Dragon Island in the northeast of the Noah continent, the chairman of the council, Fairy Dragon Frigga, and the vice-chairman of the council, Dark Dragon R.A. Firth, are sitting in the middle of the Dragon Island. In the Grand Hall, below them were wyverns of different levels. These wyverns all had the strength of the sacred domain. If they were placed in any corner of the Noah continent, they would be overlords. These overlord-class characters all had a solemn expression on their faces. They were in the middle of an important meeting on the Dragon Island, but now the meeting was interrupted by this earth-shaking aura. Frigga raised her eyebrows and a hint of surprise flashed across her pretty face. She patted the armrest of the luxurious chair under her and turned around to face the dark dragon, R.A. Firth. Lord Patriarch, did you sense it? I sensed it. The Dark Dragons, the Patriarch of the Dragon Clan, R.A. Firth, also had a solemn expression. He slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on the window, and said in a deep voice, I'm afraid another Deity Realm expert has been born. Deity Realm expert. All the wyverns below were stunned. It turned out that this earth-shaking power actually came from a Deity Realm expert. The birth of a Deity Realm expert was accompanied by an extremely powerful force that destroyed the stability of the surrounding space elements and caused a phenomenon in the world. The power of the world seemed to be welcoming the arrival of a Deity Realm expert. This power was extremely far away, and it didn't seem to be from the dragons. It was no wonder that Frigga and R.A. Firth's expressions didn't look too good. Who was it? Who was it that had become a deity realm expert? Other than the most outstanding dragons of the Noah continent, which other race's expert could become a deity realm expert in such a short time? After all, it was extremely difficult for a sanctuary powerhouse to advance in strength. Becoming a god realm powerhouse was an impossible task. Only 1 out of 1,000 sanctuary powerhouses would be able to obtain such an honor. If this person wasn't from the dragons, then who could it be? Everyone had this question in their hearts. Could it be a Beaumont clan expert? The elder of the Water Dragon clan said at this time, his eyes filled with jealousy. Why wasn't this deity realm expert from the dragons? If there was another deity realm expert among the dragons, then the dragon's status in the Noah continent would be even more important. However, if this deity realm expert was from the Beaumont clan, then things would become very troublesome. The Beaumont clan had 2 deity realm experts, which was enough to be compared with the dragons. This was something that none of the dragons wanted to see. The reason why the dragons could suppress the Beaumont clan was that they had 2 deity realm experts, while there was only 1 Beaumont clan expert. No. The fairy dragon Frigga shook her head. This isn't the direction of the Beaumont clan. Who else could it be if it wasn't the Beaumont clan expert? This time, everyone was puzzled. The elder of the Fire Dragon clan said, could it be that there is a high-level magical beast race that is more outstanding than us dragons? The dark dragon R.A. Firth slowly withdrew his gaze and shook his head. No, it seems that this aura doesn't come from the magical beast continent. It comes from... With that said, Raphael slowly turned around and swept his dignified gaze across the dragons one by one before he slowly said, "You're right. The human world." The human world? As soon as Raphael said this, the entire dragon clan's main hall seemed to have exploded. No way? How is that possible? How can an inferior race like the humans give birth to a deity realm expert? Yes, the number of sacred domain experts among the humans can't be compared to us magical beasts. How can a deity realm expert be born among the humans? Maybe it's a high-level magical beast living in the human world, no doubt. It can't be a human. Lord Patriarch must have sensed wrongly. The dragons argued one after another. They did not believe that the newly born deity realm expert would be a human. Calm down, calm down. Seeing that these people were arguing beyond reason, Frigga immediately waved her hand to calm them down. She turned to look at R.A. Firth and asked, Lord Patriarch, can you speculate who this person is? I think that, if he is someone from the Noah continent, we should know him. The Council of the Noah continent included all the sacred domain experts and above. Apart from the deity realm experts, the number of peak existences in the sacred domain could be counted on one's fingers, and it was none other than those few people. I can't speculate. R.A. Firth shook his head and said, this guy's aura is full of darkness and strangeness. Among the sacred domain experts I know, there doesn't seem to be such a person. However, I also feel that this aura seems to be very familiar. R.A. Firth thought as he fell into deep thought. Right, this guy's power comes from the kingdom of Ebbia in the human world. The kingdom of Ebbia? The Scourge Church? Frigga's eyes suddenly widened. Her eyes revealed a strong look of disbelief, and at the same time, her heart thumped. Could it be him? A familiar face appeared in Frigga's mind. It was a young man of about 21 or 22 years old. He had black hair, a thin figure, and a determined look with a hint of stubbornness. No, it can't be him. But soon, Frigga rejected this idea. Ron's strength is only at the beginning or middle level of the sacred domain. There's still a long way to go before he reaches the peak of the sacred domain, let alone becoming a deity realm expert. Frigga shook her head. Although Ron's talent in cultivation was very high, he was still too far away from becoming a deity realm expert. At this time, a light bulb flashed in Firth's mind. He thought of a person in his mind. His hands suddenly trembled, and he cried out involuntarily, could it be him? The human world, the Scourge Church, the peak expert of the sacred domain. Yes, it must be him. Apart from him, no one else among the humans had the qualifications to become a deity realm expert. Thinking of this, R.A. Firth sighed slightly. That powerful guy had become a deity realm expert. This was not good. Lord Patriarch, do you know who it is? R.A. Firth had just turned his head and met Frigga's questioning gaze. All the other dragons were also looking at him anxiously. They were eager to hear the answer from the Patriarch's mouth. That's right. A deity realm expert was born in the direction of the Scourge Church in the human world. Moreover, he is indeed a human. R.A. Firth nodded and replied. However, he did not give a direct answer to Frigga's question. He knew who it was, but he would not say it. Frigga's brows furrowed imperceptibly. R.A. Firth did not see Frigga's expression. Instead, he continued, Our council is about to welcome a senator. Frigga, you must be prepared for this. After saying that, Lafford hurriedly left the Dragon Clan's main hall, leaving behind the dumbfounded Dragon Clan experts. Lord Speaker, what should we do? After the Patriarch pulled Firth away, an elder of the dragons asked Frigga. Continue the meeting, Frigga said expressionlessly. In the Scourge Church's headquarters in Gloom City, the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. Everyone looked at the sky uneasily, as if war was about to come. The Scourge Church's followers obeyed the Church's orders and comforted the frightened people. Fully armed undead moved through Gloom City in neat rows. Spirit rings, as one of the defensive powers, a black prismatic crystal appeared at the top of the spirit summoning tower, emitting a large amount of soul energy. Once Gloom City was invaded, these spirit summoning towers would attack. Of course, the Scourge Church's followers were controlling the towers. Lord Commander! Lord Commander! Several fully armed soldiers were crowding outside of Grand Magus Necromancer Vivian's door. They were all officers of the various legions under the command of the Calamity Church. They were gathered outside Vivian's door, anxiously shouting. Vivian's current position was the commander of the various legions. She was the overall commander of the Scourge Church's armed forces and had the authority to mobilize the army. However, she only listened to Ron and the Grand Elder's orders and did not accept anyone else's authority. With a creak, the heavy wooden door opened and Vivian, dressed in a black robe, walked out of the room. At this moment she was expressionless. When the officers of the various legions saw Vivian, they immediately surrounded her. Lord Commander, according to the strange phenomenon in the sky, we sent out scouts, but they didn't find anything. A thin and small legion commander stepped forward and reported. Is the Holy See about to attack our Gloom City? A red-haired Death Knight asked. The Legion has already made all preparations for battle. Lord Commander, please give the order. A tall and sturdy figure stepped forward and said loudly. Vivian didn't have the slightest trace of nervousness on her face, even though she sensed the atmosphere of the impending battle. She glanced at all the commanders of the Calamity Church around her, and said calmly. Chapter 659. Yes, Lord Commander. All the commanders stood at attention. They obeyed Vivian's orders and returned to their stations. Vivian had her hands behind her back. She raised her head slightly and looked at the gloomy sky through the dark sky with a smile on her face. A powerful aura of death descended upon the Undercity, making people uneasy. The undead army on the main street had completely retreated. At this moment, a bolt of lightning as thick as a water bucket struck down with a boom, opening the curtains to the changes in the world. Boom, boom, boom. Countless bolts of lightning struck down, illuminating the sky. A powerful divine energy pierced through the sky, forming a spectacular pillar of light. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to have turned into ferocious beasts, roaring and rolling. Strong winds blew on the ground, causing sand and stones to fly everywhere. Lightning, thunder, dark clouds, and strong winds intertwined, forming a ferocious and terrifying image of the grim reaper in the sky. In the Undercity, the birth of a divine powerhouse attracted the attention of all parties. In the distance, as long as it was a powerhouse of the sacred domain or above, they could strongly sense this power. This power was too powerful. The powerful death energy swept in all directions, causing a change in the world. This change also alarmed the mercenaries in the tavern in another city. "Oh my God, another divine powerhouse has been born. Such a powerful and terrifying power!" A yellow-haired mercenary exclaimed. "Is this the power of a divine realm? Oh my God! It's too scary." Another knight said with lingering fear. Who is it that ascended to the divine realm?" An archer with a longbow on his back had a solemn expression. "I don't know. It seems to be in the direction of the Undercity," someone answered. "The Undercity? The Scourge Church? Oh my God, are the humans finally going to rise? A divine powerhouse has finally appeared among the humans?" A chestnut-haired mercenary exclaimed. His face was full of excitement. "Even if they ascended to the divine realm in the Undercity, I don't think it's us humans, right?" Another mercenary questioned. In a corner of the hotel, a bearded middle-aged man was drinking by himself. In front of him, there were dozens of empty wine bottles. It was as if the chaos outside had nothing to do with him. He picked up the wine bottle, poured himself a glass, raised his head, and drank it in one gulp. Looking at the empty tavern, the middle-aged man smacked his lips and revealed a satisfied smile. At this moment, he looked out the window and smiled. "Looks like there's going to be a lot of things happening in the Noah continent. How long has it been peaceful?" In the human world, some people were secretly happy, and some were pessimistic. The birth of a divine powerhouse was not as simple as having one more senator in the parliament. He was enough to change the power structure of the entire Noah continent. This indicated that the human race had already become an existence on par with the high-grade orcs and elves. "Are there humans over there?" Dark elf Aurora stood on top of a tall tree and looked into the distance. She was wearing a jade-green elven short garment, a longbow in her hand, and a pair of small elven boots on her feet. She looked extremely agile. Aurora's current strength was already at the peak of the master level. She was only one step away from entering the sacred domain. Beside Aurora stood her companion, the high priestess of the elves, the divine powerhouse Undine. Her beautiful eyes were quietly looking into the distance as she spoke slowly. "That's right. This powerful aura is coming from the direction of the human world. More accurately, it's coming from the Scourge Church." "The Scourge Church?" Aurora was stunned for a moment. The next moment, her face was filled with pleasant surprise. Could it be Ron? Ron has advanced to the divine realm? Aurora knew that Ron was a powerhouse of the sacred domain. However, she did not expect that Ron would advance to the divine realm in just a year and a half. Wasn't this too fast? It shouldn't be him. High Priestess Undine hesitated for a moment and shook her head. This aura doesn't seem like it. Moreover, Ron has just entered the sacred domain not long ago. To advance to the divine realm so quickly. Although he has extremely high talent in the cultivation of undead energy, I don't think it's possible. Hearing Undine's affirmative answer, Aurora nodded in disappointment. She was happy for Ron from the bottom of her heart that he had advanced to the divine realm. Undine glanced at Aurora and smiled. "Aurora, you have to work hard too. Otherwise, Ron will leave you further and further behind. Don't you want to become powerful enough to help him?" Ever since she met Ron, Aurora had shown a trace of disappointment. As Ron grew stronger, she felt that the distance between her and Ron was increasing. This was especially true after Shea advanced to the sacred domain. This made her feel even more anxious. Aurora hoped that when danger came, she could stand side by side with him, not hide behind him like a little girl and accept his protection. This was unacceptable for a proud elf like her, even though she knew that Ron did not mind. This was also the reason why Aurora refused to leave with Ron and stayed in the elf forest to cultivate the power of nature with Undine. If she was willing, she would have married Ron long ago like Kadena and Basara. In fact, Ron had been waiting for her all this time. Yes, Neen. Aurora's eyes showed a trace of determination. I will work hard to be with him. Undine nodded and sighed in her heart. The power of love was really great. Aurora could cultivate desperately in the elf forest for Ron. Until today, her power of nature had greatly improved. Perhaps, in the near future, she would break through to the sacred domain. This was rare even among elves of Aurora's age. On the other side of the Noah continent in the Holy Roman Empire, in the Temple of Mount Hygel, the powerhouses of the Holy See were already in a mess. They had already received news that someone in the Scourge Church had advanced to the sacred domain. Your Majesty Pope, we must immediately assemble the army and attack Undercity. Otherwise it will be too late. Dragon Knight Helen knelt on one knee and said in a deep voice, "No, do you want us to die?" A voice said loudly. He was the chief judge of the Holy See, Guangming, Ivan. What kind of strength do we have? What kind of strength does the Scourge Church have? Even if they don't have a sacred domain powerhouse, we can't defeat them. Ivan said loudly, waving his arms exaggeratedly. There was a look of fear in his eyes. He was frightened by the earth-shattering aura of the undead. If the Scourge Church gave birth to a sacred domain powerhouse, it would change the power structure of the entire Noah continent. Those with brains would think that these heretics, who were full of hatred for the Holy See, would be the first to attack the Curia. They felt the fear of the end of the world. The Pope of the Holy Church, Ernst, was sitting on his throne. His hair was white, and his hand that was holding the scepter was hanging limply. It seemed like he was thinking about something, but at the same time, it seemed like he wasn't thinking about anything at all. He just let the elders argue in the palace of God, as if none of this had anything to do with him. "Lord Pope, what do you mean?" After quarreling for a while, the elders were a little tired, so Helen turned his head and asked. Pope's zombie-like figure moved slightly. He slowly raised his head and glanced at the several sacred domain powerhouses. His heart was filled with sorrow. Wharton was dead. Holy Priest Imina had died. Leader of the Holy Knights Boulder was dead. Guangming's Chief Judge Nord was dead. The Hall of Faith's Archbishop Dokit was dead. The new sacred domain powerhouses who joined the Holy See, Vicardo and Higman, were also dead. In the huge Holy See, there were less than 3 sacred domain powerhouses left. This was not even comparable to the number of sacred domain powerhouses in an empire. Every time he thought of this, Ernst's heart felt like it was being pierced by needles. In contrast, the Scourge Church's development was flourishing. They were like a magnet absorbing a large number of talent. Geniuses who cultivated the power of the dead emerged one after another. Soon, the Abia Empire became an existence that surpassed the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire. Now, another powerhouse of the divine realm was born. How could anyone live? Are these heretics really that powerful? Ernst was unwilling, extremely unwilling. Once upon a time, he was also one of the geniuses who cultivated the power of Guangming. Step by step, he climbed to the pinnacle of power in the human world. But now, he was powerless as he watched the Holy See decline step by step. Ernst raised his eyelids. His gaze fell on a young and beautiful face. He paused, took a deep breath, and slowly asked, "Your Excellency God Eli, what do you think of this matter?" The Saintess of Guangming, God Eli, was wearing a white priest's robe. She sat quietly on the side, watching the elders argue without saying anything. She was sitting in the original seat of the holy priest, Imina, in the Hall of Redemption. After several years of cultivation, God Eli, who had the fire attribute of Guangming, already had the strength of the sacred domain. She had also become a powerful holy priest. Hearing Pope's question, God Eli stood up slowly. Her expression was gentle and demure, and she gently bowed. Your Majesty Pope, I think that in this current situation, we can only seek help from the council. The council? All the elders were surprised when they heard this. Ivan, the head of the Guangming Inquisition, frowned. Your Excellency God Eli, why do you think that the powerhouses of the divine realm of the council will definitely help us? In the past, Ivan, the head of the Guangming Inquisition, directly called God Eli by her name. But now that God Eli had become the rear guard of the Hall of Redemption, he added the word, Your Excellency, before his words. God Eli smiled slightly. It's very simple. The appearance of a powerhouse of the divine realm in the human world is bound to affect the interests of some higher races. I believe that they also don't want to see the appearance of a human powerhouse of the divine realm. In this regard, as long as we provoke and exploit them, we can suppress them. God Eli paused, then continued, Don't forget, our Holy See has signed an armistice agreement with the Scourge Church. If the Scourge Church dares to risk universal condemnation and attack us, not only will they lose their credibility, but they will also ruthlessly slap the council in the face. I believe that the chairman and senators of the council don't want to see this happen. Godeli's words made everyone fall into silence. It had to be said that they all thought that Godeli's words made sense, and there was no other way. At this time, God Eli added, Of course, this is only a temporary measure. If we want to completely solve the problem of the Scourge Church, in addition to strengthening the strength of our Holy See, we also need to produce a powerhouse of the divine realm. In the Undercity at the southern end of the Abia Empire, the tremors finally stopped, and the powerful aura finally dissipated slowly, revealing the sun through the clouds. Undercity. Outside a luxurious palace, black heads were lined up neatly in a row. They were dressed in black armor and black robes, and their expressions were solemn. These people were the core members of the Scourge Church. Gus, Vivian, Kadena, Becerra, Kay, D. Lin, Paige, Lisa, and the others. There were also countless undead soldiers. They stood quietly, as if waiting for something. At this time, the doors of the luxurious palace creaked open, and a cold and turbid aura seeped out. At the same time, a thin figure appeared. With a crash, all the undead knelt down on one knee and shouted in unison, Congratulations to the Great Elder for advancing to the divine realm. Along with the uniform voices, an old, thin, and old man in a black robe slowly walked out. He faced the crowd and nodded indifferently, his face expressionless. This old man was Ron's mentor, the Great Elder of the Scourge Church, and also the main character of this advancement to the divine realm. Chapter 660. At this moment, Homelin's entire body exuded a demonic and terrifying aura. His eyes flickered, his long white hair danced in the wind, and his black robe fluttered in the absence of wind. In the surrounding space, he formed an invisible pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. In the secondary planes, Godrealm experts were already the pinnacle of existence, just like the various senators in the parliament. In the Noah continent, no one dared to provoke them. In front of Homelin, no one dared to breathe loudly. The surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Rise, Homelin said slowly. Yes, Lord Grand Elder. At this moment, everyone saluted as if they had been pardoned and stood up. Vivian said with a smile, Congratulations to Lord Grand Elder for ascending to Godrealm. Our Scourge Church has finally produced its first Godrealm expert. Homelin smiled. Vivian, you have to work hard too. Logically speaking, you should also be ascending to the sacred domain soon. Vivian lowered her head. I'm sorry, Lord Grand Elder. I've disappointed you. It's fine. Homelin waved his hand magnanimously. Speed won't bring success. Cultivation must be done step by step and maintain a state of mind that goes with the flow. I've been stuck at the sacred domain level for 100,000 years. Isn't it the same? Thank you for your guidance, Lord Grand Elder. I've learned a lot. Vivian bowed gracefully. Homelin smiled, then his expression turned serious. Vivian, pass down my order. Order the Scourge Church's legions to assemble immediately. Assemble immediately. Vivian was shocked. Lord Grand Elder, your Northern Expedition, Homelin said resolutely, a trace of malevolence faintly appearing on his face. Some people have been peaceful for too long. It's time to settle the score with them. Vivian was shocked. Lord Grand Elder, you're attacking the Holy See? Not bad. Homelin raised his head slightly and looked at the distant sky with his eagle-like eyes, as if he wanted to see through the fog in the distance. His black robe fluttered with a ping sound, and his body emitted a powerful battle intent. The hatred that had lasted for 100,000 years continued to grow. The Scourge Church had endured for so many years, suppressing their anger like the magma of a volcano. One day it would erupt. Yes, attack the Holy See and kill Mount Shangel. Kill all those swindlers. Kill, kill, kill. As soon as Homelin finished speaking, the officers and generals below immediately became agitated. Hatred would spread. The history of 100,000 years ago had been written into the history books of the Scourge Church. Every member of the church felt grief and anger for that unbearable humiliation. Wait! Vivian was a little anxious. She reminded, Lord Grand Elder, don't forget about the existence of the Assembly. The Scourge Church signed the armistice agreement in the Assembly. In other words, if the Scourge Church were to break the armistice agreement now, they would immediately be attacked by the powerhouses of the Assembly. Haha, so what? Homelin smiled coldly, his gaze becoming extremely vulgar. No one can stop the Scourge Church, not even the Assembly. He paused and sneered. Send someone to tell all the powerhouses of the Scourge Church to withdraw. The Assembly? Vivian was shocked. What? We're all withdrawing from the Assembly? That's right. Homelin sneered. We don't have to care about their feelings anymore. After withdrawing from the Assembly, we'll immediately start the Northern Expedition. Vivian felt that her brain was about to stop working. She bit her lip. Lord Grand Elder, do you want to discuss this with young Master Ron? No need. Homelin flatly refused. Ron is still in another plane and has yet to return. I don't know when he'll be back. Besides, I have enough strength to deal with all problems. After becoming a god-level powerhouse, Homelin was extremely confident in his own strength. The Holy See's strength had been greatly reduced, and he did not need to personally take action. Gu Si, K, Di Lin, and a few other powerhouses of the sacred domain were enough to deal with them. What he really needed to pay attention to was the Assembly. If not for the Assembly's interference, the Scourge Church would have destroyed the Holy See long ago. This was also the reason why Vivian had been worried. However, Homelin had a different opinion about this. He judged that after becoming a god-level powerhouse, the Assembly would no longer interfere. The reason was simple. Although the Holy See was an extremely large force in the human world, in the eyes of the powerhouses of the Assembly, it was only an insignificant existence. Under the circumstances where their own safety was not at stake, no god-level powerhouse would fight another god-level powerhouse to the death. The dragons would not, nor would the Beaumont clan. The orcs and elves would not, even less. There was no benefit to winning, and if they lost, it would be a great loss. What if they were careless and died? It should be known that other than the highest-level dragons, the other races only had one powerhouse of the sacred domain. If Homelin was still at the pinnacle of the sacred domain, these powerhouses would still teach him a lesson. However, now that Homelin had become a god-level powerhouse, it was not worth it to fight with him. Powerhouses who could become a god-level powerhouse were no fools. The assembly was also not a monolithic block. No one would do something that would only bring them losses if there were no benefits. Seeing Homeland's insistence, Vivian did not intend to say anything else. She bowed slightly and saluted. "Yes, Great Elder. I will go and prepare immediately." In the depths of the Noah continent, in a spatial rift of a plane. This was the residence of the Noah continent's plane manager, Noah. The spatial rift was a space that he opened and was connected to the Mercenary Guild headquarters. Without permission, no one could enter. "Lord Noah, you're finally back." When Noah stepped into his home, he bumped into Mary. She looked at Noah and frowned slightly. "My lord, you went drinking again?" "Yes, ha." Noah smiled. He was the middle-aged man from the tavern just now. Mary knew that this Lord Noah did not have any other hobbies, but he liked to hang around the various taverns of the continent and drink a few cups from time to time. See, he came back with the smell of alcohol all over his body. "Haha, I drank a little." Noah smiled and changed the topic. "Mary, what's the matter? You seem to be very anxious." "Lord Noah, something big has happened." Mary quickly walked over and said in a low voice, "According to the news I received, the Scourge Church's great elder Homeland has become a god-level powerhouse." Hearing this news, Noah softly said, "Oh, this news has spread like wildfire. I already knew about it. Homeland has become a god-level powerhouse. This is a good thing. He has been in the sacred domain for 100,000 years. It's not strange for him to be promoted." Mary stomped her foot and said anxiously, "Lord Noah, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The Scourge Church and the Holy See have a deep-seated hatred. Now that a god-level powerhouse has been born in the Scourge Church, this is enough to break the balance of strength between the two sides." Mary continued, "I think that the Scourge Church will definitely use this advantage to launch another war that will engulf the entire human world. When that time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I'm afraid that this is not something that a plain manager like you would want to see." Noah smiled. Even Mary could see it, so could he. However, he didn't look nervous at all. Instead, he said with a smile, "Let's talk about it later." Chapter 661. 3 hours after Great Elder Homeland gave the order, the entire Undercity was mobilized. The undead army stationed in various places gathered at the border. At the same time, Vivian wrote a letter, requesting assistance from the Abia royal family. After reading the letter, Her Majesty Juliana was also straightforward. Without saying a word, she sent out Lachlan, who was already a great general, to lead an army of 300,000 to join forces with Vivian's undead army. 17 hours after Great Elder Homeland gave the order, the Abia Empire and the Holy Roman Empire gathered an army of 450,000. Among them, 100,000 were the elite troops led by Vivian. They were all professionals who cultivated the power of the soul. These undead, who wore black robes and black armor, received the highest instructions from the Scourge Church's great elder and gathered in the Abia Empire's strategic border town, Tanank City. They lined up in an orderly manner. Looking from above, the entire Tanank City turned into a black sea. Countless skeletal horses shuttled through the streets of Tanank City. Death Knights in heavy armor rode on the skeletal horses. Necromancers and necromancers held dark green staffs in their hands, guarding the surroundings. From time to time, a black shadow would streak across the sky. It was a necromancer riding a gargoyle. The heavy meat grinder moved slowly on the bluestone paved street. The sharp spikes scratched the ground and made ear-piercing sounds. At this time, a 10 Victories stone statue also walked on the street, following behind the meat grinder and moving forward slowly. The appearance of this strange war machine aroused the curiosity of some undead. "Look, what's this thing?" A young female Death Knight riding on a skeletal horse pointed the sword in her hand at the 10 Victories stone statue and exclaimed in surprise. This thing is called the stone statue of 10 Victories. It's one of the most powerful war machines of the Scourge Church. A female necromancer beside her said, her voice full of pride. The origin of the 10 Victories stone statue was the result of Ron obtaining the design of the 10 Victories stone statue left behind by the Scourge Church from 100,000 years ago. After that, he gave it to Fatty Gid. Gid immediately organized people and invested a lot of money to produce the war machine. It had been manufactured some time ago, and there were only a dozen or so of them. Many of the undead had never seen them before. The female necromancer had only read about it in a book. It was her first time seeing it in real life. This is the 10 Victories stone statue mentioned in the book? The female Death Knight's eyes were filled with curiosity. She rode her horse and curiously went up to touch it. She only felt that it was hard, like it was made of metal, but not wood. This action naturally caused the soldiers of the Scourge Church, who were guarding the stone statue of 10 Victories, to glare at them. "Ah, sorry." The young female Death Knight awkwardly stuck out her tongue and withdrew her hand. The soldiers of the Scourge Church glanced at her, then took the 10 Victories stone statue and left. If it wasn't for the fact that the beautiful girl was a Death Knight, they would have already arrested her as a spy. The young female Death Knight immediately retreated into the crowd and stood with her companions. However, she still looked at the 10 Victories stone statue with interest, as if it had a strange magical power. "Hey, do you know what the 10 Victories stone statue is used for?" The female Death Knight asked her companions. "You don't even know?" The female necromancer pushed the glasses on the bridge of her nose. The 10 Victories stone statue is also known as the Death's Protection. It's a powerful war machine. Standing next to the 10 Victories stone statue can comfort the souls of the undead. At the same time, it can heal injuries and recover soul power, the female necromancer explained without stopping. "It really is something good." The female Death Knight's eyes lit up. "Isn't this the same as my evil aura?" The female necromancer smiled. "Your evil aura can only heal injured undead. It can't recover soul power." The female Death Knight replied with a no. She thought to herself that she had to get Fong Gaojie closer to the 10 Victories stone statue during battle. At the same time, she asked her companions, "Right, how do you know so much?" "The instructors in the Calamity Academy told me about it." "Didn't you listen in class?" The female necromancer replied. The female Death Knight was speechless. Indeed, she hadn't listened. Even the 10 Victories stone statue has appeared. It seems like the Great Elder is determined to destroy the Holy See this time. The female necromancer muttered to herself as she watched the 10 Victories stone statue disappear into the distance. 23 hours after Great Elder Homelin gave the order, the late emissary of the Parliament finally arrived. Great Elder Homelin received him in the Calamity Hall. The emissary of the Parliament was a water-type dragon. He first sent the blessings of the Parliament's chairman Frigga to Homelin. At the same time, he invited him to become the 6th senator of the Parliament. Homelin rejected the invitation without hesitation. At the same time, he asked the emissary of the dragons to convey a message to Frigga. "You mean, the Scourge Church and all powerhouses of the sacred domain and above are to withdraw from the Parliament? And they won't be joining the Parliament in the future?" The emissary of the dragons was stunned when he heard what Homelin wanted him to convey to Chairman Frigga. "That's right." Homelin sat in the middle of the Great Hall. His black robe made him look even more solemn. "No." The emissary of the dragons flatly refused. "The Parliament is the peace organization of the Noah continent. It has supreme authority. Of course, it is up to the powerhouses to decide whether they want to join the Parliament. But once they join, they can never leave. Sorry. Great Elder Homelin, I can't agree to this." There is no precedent for this in the Parliament. Then I will set a precedent. Hamelin raised his voice and said coldly. You just need to convey this message. You don't need to care about anything else. You can't care about it anyway. You! The emissary of the dragons was furious when he heard this. As a powerful magical beast, one of the highest races in the Noah continent, he had never been humiliated like this before. He gritted his teeth and was about to explode. In an instant, the surrounding temperature dropped by a few degrees, as if winter had arrived. A faint killing intent leaked out from the emissary of the dragons. Hamelin's face was cold and expressionless. He sat there motionlessly, as if he did not put the most powerful magical beast in the Noah continent in his eyes. A contemptuous laugh came from the quiet shrine. It was from Vivian. She was laughing at the sacred domain wyvern for being impudent in front of the great elder. He was simply overestimating himself. The undead at the side also revealed a mocking smile. The Dragon Clan emissary's heart went cold. He began to understand the situation he was in. This terrifying old man in front of him was not the human that the Dragon Clan could bully, but a genuine powerhouse of the realm of the gods. This fellow is so powerful. From the aura he released, even the Patriarch might not have a chance of winning against him. The emissary of the dragons silently calculated in his heart. The arrogance on his body was immediately restrained. At this time, he forced a smile and gently bowed. Since the great elder has such a request, I will certainly convey it to the chairman, Frigga. He deliberately emphasized the words Frigga. At the same time, he carefully observed Hamelin's expression to see how he would react when he heard the chairman's name. But he was soon disappointed. The terrifying human old man in front of him did not show any reaction. He did not even show a trace of fear. The emissary of the dragons clenched his teeth. If the great elder has nothing else, I will take my leave first. I won't see you out, Hamelin coldly said. The emissary of the dragons sighed slightly and left dejectedly. He was now thinking about how to explain to Frigga and the Patriarch. When he walked to the door of the hall, Hamelin's voice sounded in his ears. You can go back and tell Frigga that the Scourge Church will soon launch an all-out war against the Holy See. If she is dissatisfied with this, she can come at me. The emissary of the dragons stopped in his tracks. His body shook violently. He turned his head and said humbly, Yes. Great Elder, I will convey it as it is. 34 hours after Hamelin gave the order, the army of the Scourge Church and the Abia Empire, who were ready for battle, set out from Tanank City. Hundreds of thousands of troops crossed the ceasefire line originally drawn by the Council and launched an all-out attack on the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire. The code name of this war was Revenge. Chapter 662. At this moment, Hamelin's entire body exuded a demonic and terrifying aura. His eyes flickered, his long white hair danced in the wind, and his black robe fluttered even though there was no wind. In the surrounding space, he formed an invisible pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. In the secondary planes, Godrealm experts were already the pinnacle of existence, just like the various senators in the Parliament. In the Noah continent, no one dared to provoke them. In front of Hamelin, no one dared to breathe loudly. The surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Rise, Hamelin said slowly. Yes, Great Elder. At this moment, everyone saluted as if they had been pardoned and stood up. Vivian said with a smile, Congratulations to Great Elder for advancing to Godrealm. Our Scourge Church has finally produced its first Godrealm expert. Hamelin smiled. Vivian, you have to work hard too. Logically speaking, you should also be advancing to the sacred domain soon. Vivian lowered her head. I'm sorry, Great Elder. I've disappointed you. It's fine. Hamelin waved his hand magnanimously. Speed won't bring success. Cultivation must be done step by step and maintain a state of mind that goes with the flow. I've also been troubled by the sacred domain level for 100,000 years. Isn't it the same? Thank you for your guidance, Great Elder. I've learned a lot. Vivian bowed gracefully. Homelin smiled, then his expression turned serious. Vivian, pass down my order. Order the Scourge Church's legions to assemble immediately. Assemble immediately. Vivian was shocked. Great Elder, your northern expedition, Homelin said resolutely, a trace of ferocity faintly appearing on his face. Some people have been peaceful for too long. It's time to settle the score with them. Vivian was shocked. Great Elder, you're attacking the Holy See? Not bad. Homelin slightly raised his head and looked at the distant sky with his eagle-like eyes. It was as if he wanted to see through the mist in the distance. His black robe fluttered in the wind as his body emitted a powerful battle intent. The hatred that had lasted for 100,000 years continued to grow. The Scourge Church had endured for so many years, and the anger that they had suppressed was like a volcano that would erupt one day. Yes, attack the Holy See and kill Mount Shangzhou. Kill all those swindlers. Kill. 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 As soon as Homelin finished speaking, the officers and generals below immediately became agitated. Hatred would spread. The history of 100,000 years ago had been written into the history books of the Scourge Church. Every member of the church felt grief and anger for that unbearable humiliation. Wait. Vivian was a little anxious. She reminded, Great Elder, don't forget about the existence of the assembly. The Scourge Church signed the armistice agreement during the assembly. In other words, if the Scourge Church were to break the armistice agreement now, they would immediately be attacked by the powerhouses of the assembly. Haha, so what? Homelin smiled coldly, his gaze becoming extremely vulgar. No one can stop the Scourge Church, not even the assembly. He paused for a moment, then sneered. Send someone to tell all the powerhouses of the Scourge Church to withdraw. The assembly? Vivian was shocked. What? We're all withdrawing from the assembly? That's right. Homelin sneered. We don't have to care about their feelings anymore. After withdrawing from the assembly, we'll immediately begin the northern expedition. Vivian felt that her brain was about to stop working. She bit her lip. Great Elder, do you want to discuss this with young Master Ron? No need. Homelin flatly refused. Ron is still in another plane and has yet to return. I don't know when he'll be back. Besides, I have enough strength to deal with all problems. After becoming a god-level powerhouse, Homelin was extremely confident in his own strength. The Holy See's strength had been greatly reduced, and he did not need to personally take action. Gu Si, K, Dilin, and a few other powerhouses of the sacred domain were enough to deal with it. The only thing he really needed to pay attention to was the assembly. If not for the assembly's interference, the Scourge Church would have destroyed the Holy See long ago. This was also the reason why Vivian had been worried. However, Homelin had a different opinion about this. He judged that after becoming a god-level powerhouse, the assembly would no longer interfere. The reason was simple. Although the Holy See was an extremely powerful force in the human world, in the eyes of the powerhouses of the assembly, it was just an insignificant existence. Under the circumstances where their own safety was not at stake, no god-level powerhouse would fight to the death with another god-level powerhouse. The dragons would not, nor would the Beaumont clan, nor would the orcs and elves. There would be no benefits if they won, but if they lost, it would be an even greater loss. What if they were careless and died? It should be known that other than the most powerful dragons, the other races only had one powerhouse of the sacred domain. If Homelin was still at the pinnacle of the sacred domain, these powerhouses would still teach him a lesson. However, now that Homelin had become a god-level powerhouse, it was not worth it to fight with him. Powerhouses who could become a god-level powerhouse were no fools. The assembly was also not a monolithic block. No one would do something that would only bring them losses if there were no benefits. Seeing Homeland's insistence, Vivian was not prepared to say anything else. She bowed slightly and saluted. Yes, Great Elder. I'll go prepare immediately. In the depths of the Noah continent, in a dimensional rift. This was the residence of the Noah continent's plane manager, Noah. The dimensional rift was a space he opened and was connected to the Mercenary Guild headquarters. Without permission, no one could enter. Lord Noah, you're finally back. When Noah stepped into his home, he bumped into Mary. She looked at Noah and frowned slightly. My lord, you went drinking again? Yes, ha. Noah smiled. He was the middle-aged man from the tavern just now. Mary knew that this Lord Noah did not have any other hobbies, but he liked to hang around the various taverns of the continent and drink a few cups from time to time. Now, he had returned with the smell of alcohol all over his body. I drank a little. Noah smiled and changed the topic. Mary, what's the matter? You seem to be very anxious. Lord Noah, something big has happened. Mary quickly walked over and said in a low voice, According to the news I received, the Scourge Church's Great Elder Homeland has become a god-level powerhouse. Hearing this news, Noah softly said, Oh, this news has spread like wildfire. I already knew about it. Homeland has become a god-level powerhouse. This is a good thing. He has been in the sacred domain for 100,000 years. It's not strange for him to be promoted. Mary stomped her foot and said anxiously, Lord Noah, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The Scourge Church and the Holy See have a deep-seated hatred. Now that a god-level powerhouse has been born in the Scourge Church, this is enough to break the balance of strength between the two sides. Mary continued, I think that the Scourge Church will definitely use this advantage to launch another war that will engulf the entire human world. When that time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I'm afraid that this is not something that a plain manager like you would like to see. Noah smiled. If even Mary could see this, he could naturally see it as well. However, at this moment, he did not look nervous at all and said with a smile. Chapter 663. Kill, charge. Kill them all, go to hell. Damn scammers. On the boundless grassland, hundreds of thousands of undead soldiers launched a huge attack on the Holy Roman Empire's main cities and border towns. Countless undead swarmed in like a tide. Looking from the sky, it looked like a black army of ants marching. Boom, 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 the meat grinders of the undead army dropped countless pieces of bloody corpses. These pieces of corpses fell on the city walls and exploded like cannonballs. Blood splattered everywhere and a foul smell filled the air. The bright red things were like living balls of meat that kept squirming. It looked indescribably disgusting. The most terrifying thing was that these pieces of corpses could spread a plague. Countless undead stood at the foot of the city walls. Specters with ranged attacks bombarded the city walls like raindrops, causing the sturdy walls to crumble and collapse. Countless corpses were left behind, all of which belonged to Holy Empire's soldiers. Retreat! Retreat immediately! The soldiers on the city walls saw that the situation was not good and shouted loudly. At the same time, they organized the defenders on the city walls to retreat. Unfortunately, he was very unlucky. He saw a huge gargoyle descend from the sky and grab him. In the blink of an eye, he was taken into the sky and was torn to pieces. The difference in strength was too great. The Scourge army only attacked for a little more than an hour, and the defenders of the Holy Roman Empire's border town, Asinaris, were killed. Blood flowed like a river. What was even more terrifying was that until now, they had not even sent out the sacred domain's experts. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses, as well as the summoned undead army, crowded on the small battlefield. Countless blood-red skull flags fluttered in the air, and it was terrifying. Boom! There was a loud sound. The enormous city gates fell down with a dull thud. Asinaris opened the gates wide and spread her legs like a virgin weakly, causing the Calamity Church's army to erupt into cheers that were as loud as the mountains and seas. The city is breached. The city is breached. Charge, charge into the city. The soldiers of the Scourge Church let out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. Woo, 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 the horn of death was blown, and the undead army of the Scourge Church was at the core of the attack. They were like a tide, crazily surging into the city, wantonly slaughtering. This huge city, which was known as a solid fortress, fell after only 2 hours of resistance. Not long after, the blood-red skull flag fluttered above the city walls of Asinaris. The whole process was an undeclared war. The Scourge Church and the Abia Empire quickly gathered a large army at the border and attacked the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire at lightning speed. Thick black smoke rose into the sky. The flames on the ground had yet to be extinguished. The city of Asinaris, which had been breached, was filled with the pungent smell of blood. The people who had yet to recover from the shock looked at the undead army shuttling through the streets with fear in their eyes, their bodies constantly trembling. The soldiers of the Abia Empire had already put up placards on the streets, informing the civilians that the war was over. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her Majesty Juliana of the Abia Empire had already made all kinds of plans. The Abia army had plenty of experience in dealing with this kind of situation. The Scourge Church's strategy towards the civilians was mainly to appease them. However, they would not be so polite towards the Holy See's cathedral. As long as it was a church building, it would be mercilessly destroyed by the Scourge Church. Those priests and bishops who were usually high and mighty were pushed out and executed in front of everyone on the other side. The commander-in-chief of the Scourge army, Vivian, and the general of the Abia Empire, Lachlan, were fully armed and escorted by soldiers as they walked into the city lord's manor side by side. Perhaps it was because the attack had been very successful, but the two of them had relaxed smiles on their faces. This city lord's manor is really big. It's almost as big as the palace of our Abia Empire. Lachlan couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the spacious and glorious city lord's manor. Vivian smiled. The Holy Roman Empire has been established for many years. Its foundation and heritage are not something that the Abia Empire, which has only been established for a few years, can compare to. However, I believe that given the time and wealth of the Abia Empire, it won't be difficult for them to build an even more spacious palace. Lachlan chuckled dryly and didn't continue on this topic. Right, Lady Vivian. Lachlan turned slightly to face Vivian, staring at her without blinking. Our next step is to directly attack Mount Shangzhou, right? Attack Mount Shangzhou. After hearing Lachlan's words, Vivian suddenly stopped in her tracks. She slowly raised her head, and a strong murderous intent flashed in her eyes. With the strength of the Scourge Church and the Abia Empire, as well as Homeland's god-level powerhouses, it wouldn't be difficult to attack Mount Hyjal. The current Holy See was no longer the Holy See of the past. The Holy See, whose strength had been greatly reduced, was no longer able to maintain its own interests and territory. If it weren't for the armistice agreement, they would have been wiped out long ago. Vivian knew that destroying the Holy See and flattening Mount Hyjal had always been Ron's wish. Vivian would fulfill this wish for him, but her rationality told her that she couldn't do so. No, we can't attack Mount Hyjal now. Vivian shook her head and rejected Lachlan's suggestion. What's wrong? Lachlan was just about to leave, but he stopped and looked at her in shock. Vivian took a deep breath and said loudly, "According to the Great Elder, the Scourge Church's war operation called Revenge is just a cover. Our goal isn't as simple as destroying the Holy See, but to fully take over the entire Holy Roman Empire. We'll keep squeezing the strategic space of Mount Hygel until, Vivian paused for a moment. Spread the teachings and beliefs of the Scourge Church throughout the human world. What? Lachlan's heart skipped a beat and he took a deep breath. This was destroying the entire Holy Church from its roots. Vivian continued, if it's just to destroy the Holy See, the Great Elder alone is enough. A divine undead magus with the power of the divine realm is in existence that they can't resist. Lachlan nodded after hearing this. He thought for a moment and couldn't help but say, will the Council, who are known as the administrators of the Noah continent, sit back and do nothing? Don't forget that the Scourge Church and the Holy See signed the armistice agreement in front of them. Vivian smiled coldly. You don't have to worry about these things. The Great Elder will make arrangements. You just have to do your own thing. I understand, Commander-in-Chief. Lachlan bowed deeply after hearing this. His face was full of admiration. He straightened up and smiled, his eyes full of eagle-like vulture. Chapter 664. Over the next few days, the flames of war continued to spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire. The Achaemenid Empire officially declared war on the Holy Roman Empire. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers rushed towards the major cities of the Holy Roman Empire like a tidal wave. At the same time, more soldiers were sent to the border to suppress the Roland Empire. The Roland Empire, one of the three giants of the human world, unexpectedly made a silent statement about the war between the Achaemenid Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. They were even afraid of causing a misunderstanding with the Achaemenid Empire. The Holy Roman Empire sent a messenger to the border of the Holy Roman Empire to form an alliance, but he was immediately sent back. The 32nd king of the Roland Empire, Nikolai, was not a fool. The Scourge Church had the first divine powerhouse in the human world, which meant that the Achaemenid Empire was about to rise. This was the general trend. Whether they liked it or not, they could only accept it. King Nikolai was glad that he had helped and supported the Scourge Church when they were in trouble. Coupled with the Balrog's Academy, there should not be too much conflict. He even wanted to send someone to contact the Scourge Church. Asinaris fell, Ironstone Castle fell, Gloria fell, and all the major cities of the Holy Roman Empire fell one after another under the attack of the Scourge Church and the Achaemenid Empire. The bloody skull flag that symbolized the Scourge Church was flying above the city walls of each city. As the war unfolded, the major cities fell one after another. The Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire were really anxious. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All kinds of letters were flying in like snowflakes. Some were asking for peace, some were asking for negotiations. At the same time, they were asking for help from the Parliament, who were thousands of miles away, hoping that the big shots in the Noah continent would intervene in this sudden war. Unfortunately, those people were disappointed. Just like the Roland Empire, the Parliament's attitude towards this war was also silent. Since the rise of the Scourge Church was unstoppable, why would they not accept it? The Orcs ruled the Orc Empire, the Elves ruled the Elven Forest, and the Dragons ruled the world of Warcraft. It was normal that the Scourge Church, as one of the poles, unified the entire human world. In the Holy Roman Empire's royal palace of St. Paolo, a carnival was held. In the solemn and sacred main hall, moving music sounded. Noble women in beautiful clothes were dancing. Beautiful, beautiful ladies, beautiful, 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 beautiful women, beautiful, 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 and beautiful. The long square table was filled with exquisite food. Beautiful maids shuttled among the guests. Although there was a smile on their faces, there was a hint of sadness in their hearts. This is the Holy Empire's palace. It's so big. Another female necromancer exclaimed. These two women were from a border city of the Achaemenid Empire. They were sisters, about 21 or 22 years old. They were in their prime. The elder sister was a necromancer, and the younger sister was a necromancer. They appeared in the Holy Roman Empire's royal palace of St. Paolo. The Holy Roman Empire had fallen, and even the royal palace had fallen into the hands of the Abbia Empire. The Holy See's defeat was irreversible. This grand banquet was held in honor of the Scourge Church and the Abbia Empire's soldiers who had performed meritorious deeds. The original owner of the royal palace had become a prisoner. The ministers who had pledged their loyalty to the Holy Roman Empire and vowed to live and die with the royal palace of St. Paolo were now trying to curry favor with their new master. "Look, that's the commander-in-chief, Vivian." As the younger sister, the necromancer's eyes were sharp, and she immediately saw Vivian. At this moment, Vivian was wearing a black robe and holding a wine glass. She was chatting happily with several Abbia Empire's generals, and a powerful undead aura emerged from her body. "It's true, it's really Lady Vivian." As the elder sister, the necromancer was shocked. "I didn't expect such a big shot like her to appear in such an occasion." "Sister, don't you know?" The younger sister smiled sweetly. Today, after she defeated the Holy Sun sent by the Holy See in front of everyone, she directly became a sacred domain powerhouse on the battlefield. "If you ask me, half of this banquet is for her." "Ah, I see," the elder sister said in realization. As the two sisters were talking, there was a slight movement in front of the royal palace's gates. "The Grand Elder is here, the Grand Elder is here." The arrival of the Scourge Church's first divine undead Magus Homelin at this small royal palace banquet caused a commotion. Hearing that the Grand Elder had arrived, Vivian was stunned for a moment, but she immediately put down her wine glass with a smile and went forward to welcome him. Countless experts followed behind Vivian with reverence in their hearts. They wanted to see the peerless demeanor of the most mysterious Grand Elder of the Calamity Church, a divine domain expert. "Make way. Make way. Don't push." A row of necromancers in heavy armor stood in a row, surrounding Homelin in the middle and escorting him in. Homelin's white hair fluttered in the wind, and his eagle-like eyes flashed. There was a smile on his face, and he seemed to be in a good mood. "Welcome, Grand Elder." Vivian led everyone forward, placing one hand on her chest and slightly bending her knees in a standard salute. "Rise, Vivian." Homelin smiled. His gaze fell on the large group of people beside Vivian, and his brows furrowed slightly. Vivian quickly stood up and said, "Everyone, disperse. I have something to discuss with the Grand Elder." "Yes, Lady Vivian." Everyone was disappointed that they did not have the chance to speak with the Scourge Church's Grand Elder, the strongest human in the divine realm. However, they still listened to Vivian's advice and dispersed. "So this is what the Grand Elder is like. I've finally seen it today." The female necromancer pulled her sister and slowly dispersed, looking back reluctantly. "Is this a divine realm powerhouse? He doesn't seem to have much of an aura, and he can't even compare to Lady Vivian." The sister said hesitantly, "What do you know? The Grand Elder has advanced to the divine realm, and his control over his power has already reached the realm of minute detail. On the other hand, Lady Vivian has just become a sacred domain powerhouse, so she naturally has a sharper aura. The strength of the two cannot be compared at all." The younger sister said, unconvinced. "I see." The older sister nodded thoughtfully. In a side room in the corner of the palace, Homelin and Vivian sat facing each other. He held a glass of wine in his hand, but he did not drink it. Instead, he gently swirled it, quietly listening to Vivian report the situation of the war these days. Hearing that they did not encounter any decent resistance in the Battle of St. Paolo, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, Homelin's face revealed a slight smile. "So, the Holy Roman Empire's royal family has lost the will to resist?" Homelin asked with a smile. "Yes, they even sent people to contact me, hoping to surrender with dignity," Vivian said, and she hesitated for a moment. "They also hope to retain the rights of the Charles royal family." At the same time, they will be infinitely loyal to the Scourge Church. Infinitely loyal. After hearing this word, Homelin smiled. He picked up the wine bottle and took a sip. These secular royal families believe in the strong. If they also have a divine powerhouse, would they surrender so easily? Then he said, "But you don't have to worry about this matter, and don't be in a hurry to make a decision." "Yes, great elder." Vivian nodded and replied. After they finished talking about business, Homelin raised his glass with a smile. "Vivian, congratulations on becoming a powerhouse of the sacred domain." "Thank you." Vivian raised her glass and clinked it with Homelin's. She smiled and said, "And congratulations to Great Elder for becoming a senator of the Assembly." "Ha ha ha." Homelin laughed heartily, raised his glass, and drank it in one gulp. "Are you wondering why I made the decision to have all the sacred domain powerhouses of the Scourge Church withdraw from the Assembly?" Vivian replied with a smile. "At that time, I didn't quite understand, but now that I think about it, it should be just a pretense to put pressure on the Assembly." "That's right." Homelin nodded approvingly. He put down his glass and stood up. Since the rise of the Scourge Church and the momentum to unify the entire human world is unstoppable, why would they reject a senator with divine power? Holy Roman Empire, Mount Hygel. Compared to the bustling imperial capital of St. Paulo, Mount Hygel, which was covered with snow, seemed so cold and cheerless. The huge Oracle Hall had lost its former glory. The former Saintess of Guangming and the current Lord of the Hall of Atonement, God Eli, reported to His Majesty the Pope about the situation of the war over the past few days. The Scourge Church had launched a large-scale attack and captured most of the cities, including the imperial capital of the Holy Roman Empire. The entire Holy Roman Empire had basically fallen. The most terrifying thing was that they had adopted a gradual and steady approach. They had only left Mount Hygel behind and were advancing forward in an encirclement. Obviously, these damned undead had set Mount Hygel as their final target for victory. God Eli could even foresee that in the near future, dozens of legions of the Scourge Church would successfully meet at the foot of Mount Hygel. Then, they would send the spokesman of God Guangming to the gallows one by one. Thinking of this, Godeli's heart suddenly shuddered. All of this was too frightening. "Lord Pope, what should we do now?" In a situation where asking for help from the council was fruitless, God Eli had no other choice. At this moment, she had lost her usual elegance and was like a little girl, looking panicked and helpless. At this moment, Pope seemed to have aged by dozens of years. He sat there quietly, like a walking corpse that had lost its vitality. Sigh. Pope slowly raised his head and let out a long sigh. His turbid eyes were full of anger. The indifference of the council towards the Holy See had broken his heart and extinguished his last flame of hope. At this moment, his heart was filled with despair. Pope Ernst slowly stood up and walked down from the throne step by step. The thick fur robe on his body slowly slid down, but he was completely unaware of it. He walked forward slowly, his mouth saying something like a madman, but it also seemed like he was saying nothing. "Your Majesty Pope." God Eli stood up and called out after hesitating for a moment. Pope Ernst did not seem to hear her. Step by step, he walked out of the Temple of God's prophecy. God Eli looked at the departing figure of His Majesty Pope and bit her lip. The corners of her eyes were slightly moist. "God will not abandon us." Chapter 665. The moon could almost be seen from the tall Oracle Peak. On the edge of the cliff, which was as sharp as a sword, stood a trembling figure. It was an old man with white hair and beard. It was Pope. At this moment, Pope Ernst was staring at the snowflakes in the sky, deep in thought. He stood at the top of the Oracle Peak, stepping on the white clouds under his feet. His deep gaze penetrated the heavy fog and reached the distance. In an instant, Pope's eyes suddenly widened. What is that? I see it all, it's an ocean of blood, countless undead armies marched forward. Skeletons, zombies, ghouls, all the undead creatures that could be named were densely packed like ants. In the sky, a few abyssal skeletal dragons flew past from time to time. On the ground, countless banners fluttered in the wind. The blood-red skull banners with black and red as the main theme carried a strange and bloody aura as they fluttered in the wind. How is this possible? How can they be here so quickly? Seeing this, Pope's body trembled violently. He did not expect that the undead had already arrived at Mount Hyjal. These are undead, terrifying undead, damned heretics, oh my God! How can these terrifying and ugly undead creatures appear in this world? They are completely incompatible with this beautiful world. No, definitely not, Pope cried out loudly. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins slowly protruded from his neck. Pung! Pope only felt his body tremble, and everything in front of him disappeared in an instant. So, all of this was an illusion. Pope heaved a sigh of relief. He used his hand to wipe off his forehead, but it was full of sweat. In this snowy day where the temperature was below zero, His Majesty Pope's back was already drenched in cold sweat. At this moment, Pope and Ernst's hearts were extremely heavy. Although the scene just now was an illusion, the Scourge Church's attack on the Holy See was real. Perhaps they would arrive here in a few days' time. Pope was not afraid of death. As a preacher, he was already prepared to teach with his life. As a believer of God Guangming, he was afraid that the world he loved would be tainted by evil. Is there really no other way? Pope murmured, a trace of confusion appearing on his face. God will not abandon us. At this moment, a voice suddenly appeared in his mind. God will not abandon us. As Pope, Ernst naturally knew that this was a sentence described in the 16th line on page 573 of the Holy Bible. God will not abandon us. Thinking of this, Pope's eyes became clear in an instant. He slowly raised his head, the expression on his face sincere and determined. The snow was still falling from the sky. The wind was roaring, like a dragon rolling up the remnant clouds. A thin old man was struggling to climb over a high flight of stairs, reaching the high platform at the top of God's Peak. The top of God's Peak was known as the place closest to the sky in the whole of Noah continent. It was also known as the place closest to God by the believers of the Holy See. This old man was Pope. Pope was old, and the weather was not good. It was not easy to climb up this high God's Peak. At this moment, his chest was heaving rapidly, and the breath he exhaled turned into clouds of white mist. At this moment, he slowly took out something from his arms. It was a book, beautifully bound. The golden title page was inlaid with gilded words, and a faint luster spread out. That was the highest law of the Holy See, the Book of God's Prophecy. Legend has it that it was a divine artifact. Pope gently stroked this Book of God's Prophecy. His eyes were filled with infinite longing, as if he was holding a small baby in his hands. Touching the Book of God's Prophecy, Pope's gaze gradually became firm, and he began to pray. God, the sinner Ernst repents to you, our Father in heaven, may the world worship your name as holy. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The world today has long been polluted by evil. The evil undead run rampant in the world, and the people who worship Guangming can only hide in the darkness. God, your children are suffering, but your loyal believers are powerless to change all of this. Pope's voice became louder and louder, and even covered the roaring snowstorm for a while. You are like a bright light in the darkness. The lost believers urgently need your guidance, Pope shouted loudly. He raised both his hands, and the Book of God's Prophecy in his hands. A trace of despair and solemnity filled the entire peak of God's Prophecy. The snow in the sky seemed to be falling more rapidly. The rain and snow mixed with the wind, roaring and ruthlessly lashing out at everything in the world. Pope held the book of God's prophecy high, motionless. His expression was holy and solemn. Pope completed his prayer, but nothing happened. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Just like that, Pope held the book of God's prophecy in his hands and stood in the snowstorm for more than 3 hours, but still nothing happened. At this moment, Pope's expression was incomparably gloomy. As an old man in his 80s, and without the tyrannical physique of a warrior, it was already not easy for him to last until now. Pope finally could not hold it in any longer. He slowly put down the book of God's prophecy in his hand. Could it be? God has abandoned us? Looking at the book of God's prophecy in his hands, Pope and Ernst only had disappointment in their eyes. At this moment, the book of God's prophecy in his arms suddenly glowed. What? Pope's gaze was incomparably shocked. The next moment, his heart was filled with ecstasy. This is the book of God's prophecies. Light grew brighter and brighter. It moved slightly and slowly left Pope's arms, rising into the air. God has already received my request. At this moment, Ernst's lips were trembling, and his body was trembling from excitement. Walala! The book of God's prophecy in the air opened by itself. The golden pages of the book unfolded one by one, like a bird spreading its wings to fly. In an instant, the book of God's prophecy shone brightly. Boom! The book of God's prophecy emitted a pillar of light, fiercely blasting towards the sky, making a dull sound. The powerful force seemed to have blasted a large hole in the sky. Space shattered, causing the world to shake. Countless dark clouds gathered, and with the pillar of light as the center, they revolved incessantly. Accompanied by countless bolts of lightning, the elements in the air became restless. Pope watched all this anxiously. At this moment, he only felt his throat dry up. Boom! 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 Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The center of the incessantly revolving vortex suddenly opened, and a vast and boundless power leaked out from within the vortex. This immense power descended upon the world, causing all living things to tremble. Legion of holy angels. Not far from Mount Hygel, an imposing figure appeared. It was Noah. At this moment, he was silently standing in the air. An unfamiliar and powerful force had opened up a spatial passage. Naturally, it could not escape the senses of a plain manager like him. At this moment, he was staring at the vortex in the distance, his brows tightly furrowed. As expected, what should come will still come. After a long while, Noah shook his head and sighed. Forget it, there's no point in worrying about these things. Let him be. Noah murmured, and his figure slowly disappeared into the air. At this moment, a human figure gradually appeared in the gigantic vortex. This is, Pope's eyes suddenly froze. The human figure that appeared in the vortex was a half-naked human male. No, he was not human. He was taller than a human, and his skin was fairer than a human's. At the same time, his eyes were blue, and his facial features were different from a human's. The most eye-catching thing was that there was a pair of pure white wings on his back, gently flapping. An angel! He was the angel described in the Holy Bible. Pope became excited. This was the first time he had seen an angel described in the Holy Bible. As long as one was a believer of the Holy See, they would be extremely excited to see an angel in the legends. The angels described in the Holy Bible were also known as Holy Spirits. They were the messengers of God, carrying the will of God as they walked the world. They were the embodiment of beauty and holiness, and they could not tolerate the existence of evil in the world. At this moment, Pope finally saw the face of the angel clearly. It was an extremely perfect young man. The reason why he was described as perfect was from a human's point of view. His hair was a noble golden color, and it was slightly curly. It was very natural. His half-naked upper body was graceful, and the muscles on his body were just right. He did not appear burly, nor did he appear thin. His skin was as delicate as a baby's, without a single scar. He was slightly taller than a human, but he did not appear burly. His exquisite face, coupled with his perfect facial features, was enough to make all the female creatures in the human world go crazy. He was an angel, perfect and flawless. At this moment, the snowstorm stopped, and countless rays of light sprinkled down from the sky, dyeing the entire earth with a layer of gold. The angel stood quietly in the void, silently observing the world below. There was no expression on his face, but there was a feeling of disdain for the world. Not long after, he seemed to have sensed something. He frowned slightly, and a trace of displeasure appeared on his face. In this plane, he smelled an extremely unusual aura, and this aura made him feel disgusted. At this time, the angel's gaze fell on Pope standing atop God's prophecy peak. He faintly smiled, and then descended, arriving in front of Pope. This angel's body was surrounded by a holy light, making it so that no one dared to look directly at him. His strength was unfathomable, and standing in front of him made one feel stifled. This was a peerless strength that surpassed a powerhouse of the divine realm. Noah Continent, Holy See Pope, Sinner Ernst, respectfully welcomes the arrival of Lord Envoy. In front of the angel, Pope fell to his knees, an incomparably pious look on his face. In the legends, angels were servants of the gods, but to Ernst, they still had to be treated with the highest courtesy. "You are Pope, Ernst?" the angel slowly said. The language that came from his mouth was like a spring breeze. At this time, he slowly stretched out a hand. Pope understood. He knelt on one knee, stretched out his hands, and placed them in the hands of the angel. This was the highest courtesy of the Holy See. The angel faintly smiled, satisfied that he understood the etiquette of the Holy See. God will not abandon you. He will give the lost believers the correct guidance, O God Guangming above. Pope was so excited that his voice trembled. Your loyal believer needs your help. Rise. The angel faintly smiled and withdrew his hand. It was a pair of hands as white as a woman's, extremely perfect. Yes, Lord Envoy. Pope calmed his excited mood and stood up. However, Sir Pope, there is one thing that you have misunderstood. I am not an angel, so you do not need to call me Lord Envoy. Pope was surprised and stood up. Then you are. God has already heard your call, so he sent me down. The angel glanced at him and faintly smiled, revealing a row of white teeth. The pair of wings on his back gently flapped as he spoke boldly. I am the Son of God, walking the world with the sword of Guangming in my hand, vowing to destroy all darkness and evil. The angel paused for a moment and continued speaking. Chapter 666. Dozens of people were seated in the large hall of prophecy. In Pope Ernst's memory, the hall of prophecy had not been so lively in a long time. Pope Ernst had already left his original seat and was sitting respectfully in his place in the middle of the hall of prophecy. The one seated in the middle was the holy angel Andrew, who had descended from the main plane of order. He was God's emissary and represented God's will in descending to this small subcontinent. However, he was not the only one who had descended with Andrew. His personal guard had also followed him to this subcontinent. Dozens of angels were lined up in a row, surrounding God's emissary Andrew like stars surrounding the moon. These angels were all at least in the sacred domain, and a few of them were even at the peak of the sacred domain. However, the master of these angels, Andrew, was at the divine realm. The divine realm. Seeing the divine realm aura emanating from Andrew, Ernst could not help but feel excited. He had always hoped that the Holy See would also produce a divine realm expert to contend against the Scourge Church. Even if this person was not him, even if this person asked him to give up the position of Pope, he would not refuse. The other dozens of angels stood quietly in the surroundings, folding their wings and looking indifferent. In terms of appearance, these angels were not much different from humans. They were slightly taller, had fairer skin, and had an additional pair of wings on their back. Andrew's eyes were tightly shut, his left and right fingers gently tapping on the armrest of his seat as he quietly listened to Pope's report. The few remaining sacred domain experts of the Holy See quietly sized up this angel who had descended by God's decree, a hint of curiosity in their eyes. Only the Lord of the Hall of Atonement, God Eli, looked at Andrew with a hint of passion in her eyes. Handsome appearance, noble status, powerful strength. All these factors added together were enough to make any woman go crazy, and God Eli was no exception. Especially that extremely perfect face, it even made people feel like they were hallucinating. This was not a real human being, but a dreamlike Prince Charming. The Pope's mouth was dry from talking. He wanted to describe the 100,000 years of history of the Holy See since the first Pope, Antonio, defeated the Scourge Church. This was not an easy task. It took 3 whole hours for Pope to finish narrating everything. When it came to the current situation of the Holy See, Pope's face was a little gloomy. After listening to the Pope, the holy angel Andrew opened his eyes. His face was calm as an ancient well. At this time, he spoke. "To be honest, I'm very disappointed." As soon as Andrew opened his mouth, he negated all the efforts of the Holy See over the past 100,000 years. In other words, the Holy See had made a mess of everything for the past 100,000 years. Pope and the other 3 powerhouses of the Holy See had ugly looks on their faces. However, on account of Andrew's reputation as a son of God and a powerhouse from the divine realm, they did not make a sound. Andrew continued, "My father had secretly launched an attack against the Scourge Church in Amros, the predecessor of the Noah continent. He even led the legion of holy angels in a desperate battle against the Scourge army that had descended to the subplane. Both sides invested a large number of troops until the entire continent was destroyed. Only then did the Scourge army vanquish and obtain the final victory. It can be said that my father had invested a lot of resources in this area, but now..." Andrew spoke slowly. At this moment, his face was frosty, and his tone gradually became stern. "The annihilated Scourge Church has once again risen from the ashes. The entire continent is practicing evil magic, and the ugly spirits of the dead have once again run rampant in the human world. I want to ask you, all these years, what has the Holy See been doing?" Andrew's voice was not loud, but it buzzed in everyone's ears. It was accompanied by a powerful pressure that caused everyone to break out in cold sweat. They could not say a word. As Pope, Ernst was so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. The Scourge Church had disappeared for 100,000 years, until a young necromancer called Ron appeared like a shooting star and re-established the Scourge Church, becoming the most powerful force in the human world. It had only been a few short years. During this period of time, Ron had been in power. No matter what, the Pope could not get away with it. It should be known that the struggle between the Holy See and the Scourge Church involved the struggle between the forces of the subplanes. These powerhouses of the main plane fought for faith and territory. It was common for them to fight openly and covertly and start wars. They constantly supported representatives in the subplanes and erected their faith to serve their interests. These legions of the main plane even controlled thousands of such subplanes and spread their faith in these subplanes. Just like the continent of Amros 100,000 years ago, the entire continent was under the absolute control of the Scourge Church. There was no space for Guangming practitioners to live here. It was because of this that after the Lich King left Amros, the Legion of Holy Angels planted a nail in the continent. This nail was the Holy Society. Receiving the great support of the Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane, the Holy Society thrived and continuously eroded the foundation of the Scourge Church's rule. After the Scourge Church lost the Lich King, it fell into discord. The two factions fought endlessly. All of this made the powerhouses of the Holy See, who were only at the Holy Society at that time, see hope. They incited the various powerhouses of Omros who were dissatisfied with the rule of the Scourge Church and fought with the Scourge Church. They greatly depleted the elite forces of the Scourge Church, until they launched the final Holy War and destroyed the Scourge Church in one fell swoop. On the other hand, the Lich King led the Scourge army back to the main plain and fought a desperate battle with the Legion of Holy Angels. They fought until the continent of Omros was destroyed and all living beings migrated to a new continent. That was another story altogether. All in all, the disappearance of the Scourge Church from the continent of Omros was a scheme of the Legion of Holy Angels. It was all for the sake of seizing control over the continent of Omros. These high and mighty angels once thought that there were no more undead in the subplane of Noah. They had obtained complete victory, destroyed the undead, and spread Guangming to the world. It was a pity that they had miscalculated. 100,000 years later, the destroyed Scourge Church was once again rejuvenated. It exploded with powerful vitality and even produced a powerhouse from the divine realm. All of this made Andrew extremely angry. What the hell was the Holy Church doing? What the hell was the Holy Church doing? Not only did they not spread the faith of Guangming to every corner of the continent, but they were even attacked by evil forces to the Holy Mountain. If it wasn't for the mediation of a neutral organization called the Assembly, there would probably be no humans in the entire continent of Noah who believed in Guangming. Foolish, incompetent. This was Andrew's evaluation of the Pope. At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. He believed that this was a huge mistake, and someone had to take responsibility for it. Sir Oracle! The Pope and Ernst knelt down from their seats with a thud. They looked at Andrew's noble face and smiled sadly, their faces filled with endless regret. Sir Oracle, I can't deny that in this matter, as the Pope, I have an unshirkable responsibility. Let me bear all the blame in the name of blood. After Ernst said this, he immediately took out an exquisitely decorated dagger from his bosom, aimed it at his own heart, and viciously stabbed it. Sir Pope, the other three powerhouses of the Holy See, Ivan, Heron, and God-Eli, all cried out in alarm. Heron's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He rushed up like an arrow, snatched the dagger from Pope's hand, and casually threw it aside. Your Majesty Pope, please don't do anything stupid, Ivan said loudly. These things have nothing to do with you at all. Yes, Sir Pope, death won't solve anything. God-Eli also tried to persuade him. In the face of Pope's sudden action, Andrew sat quietly from beginning to end. He didn't even look at him. The other angels were the same. There was only indifference on their delicate and handsome faces. Heron glanced at Andrew, took a step forward, knelt on one knee, and mustered up his courage to speak. Sir Oracle, now is not the time to pursue responsibility. The army of the Scourge Church is advancing triumphantly, and will soon reach Mount Hygel. For the sake of the millions of believers of the Holy See, for the sake of our devout faith, I think we should unite as one and destroy the Scourge Church. After Heron finished speaking, the entire temple of God fell into silence. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. God-Eli saw that the faces of the angels had changed a little. Those azure-blue eyes clearly contained a strong desire to kill. Even in the main plane, it was an extremely serious crime to verbally contradict an oracle from the main plane. Don't forget that to a certain extent, an oracle represented God. They represented God's will. They represented God's supreme authority. Contradicting an oracle was no different from contradicting God. Everyone broke out in cold sweat for Heron. Heron knelt on the ground and clenched his teeth, but he did not take a step back. He owed a debt of gratitude to Pope, so at this time, he had to stand up. Andrew's gaze gradually fell on Heron. Through his eyes, a strong pressure burst forth from his sword-like gaze. he said slowly. "Are you teaching me how to do things?" Heron only felt a boom in his mind. He felt a sweetness in his chest, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. In just a moment, he was seriously injured. The power of an oracle was far beyond everyone's imagination. Heron's heart was filled with horror. He was amazed at the power of the oracle in front of him. He did not see him do anything, but he was already seriously injured. He understood that if the oracle wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as pinching an ant to death. "No, I dare not." Heron's face was ashen, and he stepped back sadly. He knew that in front of this oracle, there was nothing he could do. Andrew remained expressionless. If it was not for the powerful aura just now, no one would know that he had made a move. His gaze fell on the old face of the Pope, and he snorted coldly. "Fine. As for the matter of investigating who is responsible, let's wait until the war is over. If you want to wash away your crimes, you have to work hard for me. But you can't run away from the responsibility that you have to bear." Seeing that the oracle had let the Pope go, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. "Yes, thank you, oracle," Ernst replied with a gloomy look. He knew that regardless of whether the undead were eliminated or not, the Scourge Church was destroyed. His position as the Pope had come to an end. After Andrew finished speaking, he fell into deep thought again. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest of his seat. This was his habit of thinking. The oracle hall was quiet again. No one dared to breathe loudly for fear of interrupting the oracle's thoughts. The rhythmic tapping finally stopped. Andrew raised his head and said slowly, "Where are the undead now?" Heron took a step forward and said, "Reporting to the oracle, the undead have crossed the Leighton Mountains and are now heading towards Mount Hygel. They will reach Mount Hygel in about 3 days at the earliest." 3 days? Andrew paused for a moment and nodded. The severity of the situation was indeed beyond his imagination. "Rodewald. Here." An angel stepped forward. He was a burly middle-aged man, and he was also the head of the guards of Andrew, the Son of God. This angel named Rodewald had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain. "You will lead the angel army to intercept them. Remember, don't let them meet at Mount Hygel." "Yes, Prince Andrew." Chapter 667. On the endless plains, tens of thousands of undead slowly marched forward, like a group of black ants moving between the mountains. They were one of several undead legions. Skeletons, zombies, ghouls, and other undead creatures were the basic components of the undead legion. They were also the most numerous undead creatures, commonly known as cannon fodder. Behind these cannon fodder were a large number of necromancers, and other professions. If they wanted, they could summon more cannon fodder to fight. The endless undead army was a nightmare that all the city soldiers could not get rid of. These fearless undead creatures launched attacks with the momentum of a tide. Wherever they went, not even a blade of grass could survive. No one could resist this black tide, not even the strong ones of the sacred domain. The undead army advanced triumphantly all the way. After defeating several Holy Roman Empire regiments, all the cities surrendered. Some of them didn't even wait for the arrival of the undead army. They hung up white flags and opened their gates, waiting for the undead army to enter. Of course, there were still some places that resisted, such as the Holy Cathedral. The people who had been brainwashed by the Holy See would not give in so easily. They caused losses to the undead. However, such a smooth attack made some generals of the Scourge Church feel elated. They firmly believed that in a few days, the undead at the foot of Mount Hygel would launch a final attack on the Holy See. The Holy See would become a name and completely disappear in the long history of the Noah continent. They even believed that with the strength of the Scourge Church, it would not be difficult to attack the Orc Empire, the Elven Forest, and the world of Warcraft. Unifying the entire Noah continent would not be difficult as long as they were willing. The invincible undead would be the best cannon fodder. All creatures would live in fear under the shadow of the undead, just like the Scourge Church did 100,000 years ago. A Death Knight who looked like a general picked his teeth with a bamboo stick and said with a fake smile, "Hey, buddy, how long until we reach Mount Hyjal?" According to the distance, about 2 days. The necromancer beside him took out a map and looked at it, then replied, "But we still have 3 cities. Oh my God, 3 cities!" The Death Knight general wailed. "Let me die. After we take down these 3 cities, it will take at least 7 days to reach Mount Hyjal." The necromancer spread out his hands. "There's no other way. This was ordered by Commander-in-Chief Vivian. We can't not do it, right?" The Death Knight general rolled his eyes. "What do you say we go around them?" "Go around them?" The necromancer was obviously taken aback. He hesitated for a moment. This is against orders. If that happens, you and I will probably be court-martialed. But it's too slow now." The Death Knight raised his voice and said, "We only have 3 cities left, and it will take at least a few days to take them down. By the time we arrive at Mount Hyjal, the Holy Church will have nothing left, and our contributions will be gone." But, although the necromancer knew that the other party was telling the truth, he still hesitated. Of them. It's decided then." Seeing that the staff officer was a little moved, the Death Knight patted him on the shoulder and smiled. "Don't forget, I'm the commander of this army. I'll take care of everything by myself." The necromancer was finally convinced and nodded. Suddenly, his expression froze and his eyes widened. Through the eyes of the crows in the sky, he saw something in the distance. It was an army in white clothes and white armor. They looked cold and stern, exuding a detestable holy aura. They were marching in neat steps towards them. "What's wrong?" The Death Knight saw the necromancer's strange behavior and asked. "Over there, about 5 kilometers away, there seems to be an army." The necromancer raised his hand slightly and pointed to the front. He murmured, "That's the army of the Holy See." "The army of the Holy See?" The Death Knight general heard and immediately asked, "How many people are there?" "About 10,000. The necromancer nodded and said, 10,000? Could it be the main force of the Holy See? Good, they finally can't hold back an attack." The Death Knight was excited. After saying that, he waved his hand and summoned a tall death horse. At the same time, he pulled out the knight's sword from his waist and raised it high. He shouted, "Ha, brothers, we have work to do. 5 kilometers ahead, there's an army of the Holy See, about 10,000 people. Ha, isn't this a reward delivered to our doorstep?" All the necromancers were energized when they heard that. Everywhere they went, all the cities surrendered. They hadn't tried a decent battle for a long time. It was like they had money but nowhere to spend it. They couldn't muster up any energy. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone pulled out their weapons and the Death Knights mounted their death horses. "Pass down my order, all troops attack and destroy them. Leave no one alive," the Death Knight Legion commander shouted. At the same time, he rode his death horse and strode forward. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" All the Death Knights charged out like a whirlwind and the other professionals quickly followed. It was rare to encounter the main force of the Holy See in a decisive battle. Who knew if the Holy See still had an army? Wait, looking at the frenzied undead, a trace of hesitation appeared in the necromancer's eyes. Looking at the army, he had a feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. "Forget it, let's go take a look first." The necromancer sighed and summoned a gargoyle. He jumped on it. Smoke and dust rose on the plains. It was the first charge of the undead army and the Death Knights. Their army had tens of thousands of people and horses. With the addition of the summoned undead, their numbers could be increased tenfold to hundreds of thousands. It was a piece of cake to destroy a 10,000-strong army of the Holy See. Speed up! Speed up! The Death Knight General rode on the skeletal horse and galloped. His eyes were burning with fighting spirit. Sir Rodewald, the undead are coming! In the Holy See army, a soldier-like person reported to Rodewald. They were part of Andrew's Legion of Holy Angels and were led by Rodewald. These 10,000 people were the elites of the Legion of Holy Angels. They're here. Rodewald smiled. It's good that they're here. It saves me the trouble of looking everywhere. Let's teach them a good lesson, these reckless fools. Pass down the order, prepare for battle, Rodewald said with a frosty expression. Yes, Sir Guard Captain. The soldier replied loudly. Get into battle formation immediately and prepare for battle. Following Rodewald's order, the well-trained Legion of Holy Angels spread out with a swoosh. Everyone took out their weapons and looked ahead with cold expressions. He was getting closer and closer in the eyes of the Death Knights. A row of troops wearing white clothes and white armor appeared in front of them. The flag with the Red Cross symbol fluttered in the wind. Their shields and clothes also had the same Red Cross symbol. It was indeed the army of the Holy See. A sinister smile appeared on the Death Knight's face. These people were all going to die. Kill! With a roar like the mountains and seas, the blood-red skull flag fluttering in the wind became more ferocious. At this time, the undead army launched a charge. Archers, get ready! Fire! Following the command of the Holy Angel Guard captain, the second row of archers raised the crossbows in their hands. Countless arrows with the power of Guangming suddenly shot out. Bang! 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 Dozens of undead fell in response. Archers, fire! Another wave of arrows rained down, and another batch of undead fell. Boom! 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 The sudden attack stunned all the undead. They hadn't even fought with the enemy, but they had already lost close to 100 people. The Death Knight's heart was dripping blood. Ever since the start of the war, his army had never suffered such a huge loss. Necromancer! The Death Knight's commander roared. They're here. The necromancer's voice came from the sky. Skeleton warriors, mages, black knights, come out! Kacha kacha! The ground solidified and turned into a black substance. At the same time, countless white skeletons drilled out from the ground. The necromancer Archmage in the sky led his team of necromancers to launch an attack at the same time. Countless skeletons were summoned, and the undead army's numbers suddenly increased by several times. The momentum was great. Awoo! Awoo! The undead army launched an attack under the lead of the Black Knights. That's right, they were cannon fodder to deplete the enemy's strength. It's still these useless skeletons. Haven't the undead made any progress after all these years? Seeing the countless undead rushing over like a tide, Rodewald's face revealed a trace of a smile. Then, his smile disappeared. All soldiers, prepare for battle. Following the command of Rodewald, all the soldiers of the Legion of Holy Angels prepared for battle. Boom! 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 The soldiers of the Legion of Holy Angels had already clashed with the undead army. The battle was intense. What? At this moment, the Death Knight Legion commander was completely stunned. The army of the Holy Church in front of him didn't collapse like a tidal wave. Instead, they had the upper hand. Countless undead creatures were burned into ashes by the weapons that were shining with holy light. Holy Crusade, attack! Following Rodewald's command, a troop of heavy infantry with only their eyes exposed moved out. They charged out like a heavy tank, crushing everything in their path. Even the Black Knights, who were known for their defense, were only able to fight to a draw. The Holy Angel Guards harvested the lives of the undead soldiers like harvesting wheat. The summoned undead creatures were as fragile as paper under the illumination of the holy light and turned into ashes one after another. And the necromancers who had lost their protection were killed one by one. This is impossible. The leader of the Death Knights no longer had any thoughts of underestimating the enemy. He was shocked by the strength of this army. At this moment, he only felt fear. Holy light illumination. Purification. Holy flame fire. As Guang Ming used his skills one after another, more than half of the undead army was killed or injured. This army of the Holy Sea was terrifyingly strong. The undead army that was invincible was blocked by a powerful force on this boundless plain. Lord Legion Commander, let's go! At this moment, the necromancer had already killed his way to the side of the Death Knights. At this moment, he was covered in blood. He pulled the Legion Commander's arm and said loudly, "Go." The leader of the Death Knight's heart was completely cold. That hateful army of the Holy See had killed many of his brothers. How could he leave now? At this moment, the leader of the Death Knights suddenly turned around and stabbed his sword into a soldier of the Holy See. He then pulled it out. That person fell down with blood spurting out. He roared, "No, I can't go. I want to kill them. I want to fight with them." "No," the necromancer said loudly. "We are no match for them. Look carefully. These people are not human. They are not human." The leader of the Death Knights was stunned. His gaze fell on one of the soldiers of the Holy See. That's right. Although these people looked similar to humans, from their faces they were obviously not human. How is this possible? The leader of the Death Knights felt that he had fallen into a trap. These people are not human. Who are they? Where did they come from? What is their relationship with the Holy See? The necromancer shook his head desperately, indicating that he did not know. "Let me tell you." At this moment, a majestic voice came from the sky. The two of them looked up abruptly and were shocked. They saw that above their heads, a figure had appeared out of nowhere. The figure was a middle-aged man. He wore simple white armor and held a white one-handed longsword in his hand. His expression was cold. The most strange thing was that he had a pair of huge white wings on his back that were gently flapping. A powerhouse of the sacred domain? The eyes of the Death Knights and necromancers widened. Their hearts were filled with shock. To be able to float in the sky and emit a powerful aura at the same time, he was undoubtedly a powerhouse of the sacred domain. The figure stood quietly in the air and looked at the two of them with a cold smile. "Although I really want to tell you, I don't think you have time to listen." With that, he raised his sword and slashed down. Bang! 2 pillars of blood suddenly splashed more than 10 meters into the air, accompanied by 2 rolling heads that fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 668. In a simple house on the outskirts of a city in the Holy Roman Empire, a large map was hung on the wall. The commander-in-chief of the Calamity Church, Vivian, was dressed in a black robe as she sat at the head of the table. She was quietly listening to the commander in front of the map as he explained the situation to her. Most of the people in the room were high-ranking officers of the Calamity Church and the Ebbia Empire. The person in charge of the narration was a young man in his 20s. He wore the uniform of the Egyptian army, and there was not a trace of stage fright on his calm and resolute face as he spoke in front of everyone, explaining the overall situation of the war to everyone. Vivian nodded. This young man was indeed a top student from the Imperial Academy. She heard that he was also a member of the royal family and was highly regarded by Her Majesty Juliana. If things went as expected, this young man might take over Lachlan's position in the future. "I'm done. Next, please give me your instructions, Commander-in-Chief." The young man from the Imperial College of International Affairs briefly explained the situation, then retreated to the side with his hands hanging down. Vivian nodded with satisfaction. She stood up and was about to speak when suddenly, bang! The tightly shut door was suddenly pushed open, startling everyone in the room. It was a soldier who had suddenly barged in. Vivian frowned and felt a little annoyed. These soldiers did not know the severity of the situation. Did they not know that there was an important military meeting in the room? How could they just barge in like that? Vivian opened her mouth and was about to reprimand the soldier. Before she could say anything, the soldier hurriedly said, reporting to the commander-in-chief, "There's an emergency." Vivian's heart skipped a beat and the words of reprimand suddenly changed her mind. What's the matter? The 17th and 35th Legions of the Scourge Church were ambushed by the enemy and were completely wiped out, the soldiers said in one breath. What? When the people in the room heard this, their expressions changed. Some of the high-ranking generals stood up with a swish sound. Vivian's expression did not change at all, but at this moment her heart was in turmoil. She knew the situation of the 17th and 35th Corps better than anyone else. That was an elite legion composed of all professions. Their combat power was not something that ordinary legions could compare to. Even the soldiers of the legion could fight against 10, and it was a one-sided massacre against those ordinary legions. Apart from empires, it was extremely difficult for small and medium-sized kingdoms to raise such an elite army. Not to mention other things, just the recruitment of these professionals was an extremely troublesome problem. Fortunately, the Scourge Church's teachings were the core of the Church's teachings, and the teachings of necromancy were supplemented by the spread of necromancy magic. These necromancers were completely loyal to the Church, and in just a few short years, they had accumulated a great amount of power. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for such a powerful elite army to appear. However, 2 of such elite legions were wiped out at once. This was a huge shock to everyone. Was it the Holy See? Motherf ***, these swindlers have finally made their move. Let's quickly assemble the army and crush them. Yes, let's fight to the death with them, until one of us dies. As soon as the soldier finished speaking, the room suddenly exploded. All the generals stood up with righteous indignation, each of them rubbing their fists and rubbing their palms. They could not wait to fight to the death with the Holy See. Silence. A soft voice was heard, but it was Vivian. Only then did the generals quiet down. The corner of Vivian's mouth twitched a few times. She took a deep breath and quickly calmed down. After thinking carefully, she realized that many things were not right. Annihilating 2 elite legions in one go, with the current strength of the Holy See, was probably difficult to achieve. If they had such strength, they would have sought out the main forces of the Scourge army long ago. Why would they sit and watch the cities of the Holy Roman Empire fall one by one? After thinking this through, Vivian felt even more strange. If it was not the Holy See, could it be the kingdom of magical beasts? Did the council really make a move? Only the magical beast army sent by the council would have such strength. Vivian slowly raised her head. Her beautiful eyes were filled with an ominous glint. She coldly shouted, "Who did it? It's a race that we have never seen before. Among them, there are many powerhouses from the sacred domain." Speaking of this, a trace of fear appeared on the soldier's face. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. But according to some of the soldiers who escaped from the front lines, this unknown race seems to be the angels in the Holy See myths and legends. Angels! When everyone heard this, they were stunned. At the same time, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. Many people had heard of angels, but this was a creature that only appeared in the myths and legends of the Holy See. Would such a creature appear on the battlefield? Would it appear in reality? This was not a joke, right? If the Holy See had such ability, they would have unified the human world long ago. Don't think that they did not have such ambition. Ridiculous. What a joke. This is not true. It's a lie. Drag him out and kill him. After the soldier finished speaking, the room was in an uproar again. None of the generals believed the soldier's words. Many even thought that it was an excuse that the frontline army had come up with because they had lost the battle. Fabricating a lie because of a defeat was too vile. Commander-in-Chief Vivian's expression was uncertain. Unlike everyone else, she believed in the existence of angels. It was not strange for them to appear in front of her. What she found strange was, where did these angels come from? Could it be? Vivian's heart suddenly tightened. She took a deep breath. Pass down the order. Inform D. Lin and K to gather immediately. Oh right, and Co-op. I almost forgot about him. Coop was the Earth bear cub that Shea had brought back from the other plane. The difference was that the bear cub back then was already an adult. At this moment, he had the strength of the sacred domain. He had become one of the strongest powerhouses of the Scourge Church. Yes, the soldier stood at attention and said loudly. On the boundless plains, a bloody battle was unfolding. No, this was not a battle. It was a massacre, a one-sided massacre. Under the lead of the Angel Guard Captain Roddiwald and several angels from the Sacred Domain, the Holy Angel Guard Legion had slaughtered the Scourge Army and the Abia Army until not a single soldier was left alive. There was a good show of chasing on the plains. The Holy Angel Guard Legion, which was relatively small in number, chased the hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the Scourge Church and the Abia Army back like duck. The soldiers who could not escape in time fell into a pool of blood. Under the lead of the angels from the Sacred Domain, the well-trained Angel Guard Legion was like an indestructible tank. The enemies fell like wheat being harvested. However, the Angel Guard Legion did not intend to let these people go. As long as they were still breathing, they would be purified. The purpose of the Legion of Holy Angels was to destroy all evil. The Angel Guard Legion interpreted this very well. An angel from the Sacred Domain looked at everything in front of him, crossed his arms, and sneered. He turned his head and said to Roddiwald, "Ha, Lord Roddiwald, you see, this army is really too weak. Compared to the war in the mortal plane, it's like a child playing house. I really think that it's too boring to destroy such an enemy." Roddiwald's face was gloomy. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a moment and said, "Don't underestimate the enemy. The undead army is still very strong. Not to mention how strong they are, the key is their terrifying number," Roddiwald said. His gaze naturally fell on the tall flagpole. It was a broken blood-red skull flag. Although the undead army had been defeated, this flag was still fluttering high and had not fallen from the beginning to the end. The blood-red skull flag. Roddiwald's heart skipped a beat, and the scene of the past appeared in his mind. He sighed slightly. It's a pity that the Scourge Legion that was famous in the mortal plane is gone forever. The current Scourge Legion is not the slightest shadow of the main battle army of the past. Roddiwald also participated in the battle in Amrose 100,000 years ago. At that time, he was just a small swordsman. The valiance of the Scourge Legion was still fresh in his memory, especially that terrifying figure. Roddiwald's heart was still filled with fear when he thought about it. But fortunately, he's already dead. That terrifying Scourge Legion no longer exists. No matter what, it's a good thing to have eliminated a powerful enemy for the mortal plane of order, Roddiwald thought to himself. Seeing that Roddiwald did not speak, the angel from the Sacred Domain lost interest in talking. He yawned. "It's too boring to stay here. I'd better go kill some people." "Wait." Just as the angel from the Sacred Domain pulled out his sword and was about to pounce, Roddiwald stopped him. At this moment, Roddiwald's brows were furrowed. His pair of handsome eyes quietly looked at the sky, and he said in a deep voice, "They're here." "What? What's here?" The angel from the Sacred Domain did not react. After all, his strength was too far from that of the guard captain. "The powerhouses of the Scourge Church. They're here," Roddiwald explained expressionlessly. He smiled slightly. "Since that's the case, let's go meet them." After saying that, he extended his body and flew into the air with a swoosh. Roddiwald's intuition was not wrong. At this moment, 4 small black dots appeared in the sky. They were Vivian, D-Lin, Guy, and Co-op. They were rushing towards the battlefield. Apart from Vivian, the other three were all magical beasts. It had to be said that the Scourge Church was currently in a shortage of talent. There were too many soldier-level professionals, but there were very few master-level and master-level professionals. Apart from Ron, only Vivian had the strength of the sacred domain. Chapter 669. Following the arrival of Vivian, several elite legions of the Scourge Church had also rushed to the battlefield. A fierce battle was unavoidable. Vivian quietly sized up the angels, but she was secretly shocked. The angels in front of her looked like humans, but they were extremely powerful, especially the middle-aged man in the middle. His strength was probably at the peak of the sacred domain. The figures in the sky were alarmed by the movements on the ground. The soldiers of the Scourge Church on the ground cheered loudly as if they had seen their savior. "It's Lady Vivian. Lady Vivian is here. Look, isn't that Lady K next to her? Even Lady D-Lin is here." The soldiers of the Scourge Church chattered one after another, their eyes brimming with excitement. Vivian was not as optimistic as them. The angels in front of her were too powerful. This battle would not end so easily. "Who are you? Why are you helping the Holy See?" Celestial Wolf King D-Lin asked with a straight face. She did not expect such a powerful team to suddenly appear and turn the situation around for the Holy See. "We are the Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane of order," Rodewald replied coldly. "The Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane." The expressions of the Scourge Church's experts changed drastically. They knew what the main plane meant. The powerful and vast main plane had countless vast territories. In comparison, the Noah continent was too small. Even if all the forces of the Noah continent were added together, they would not be able to compare to the Legion of Holy Angels. The relationship between the Holy See and the Legion of Holy Angels was obvious. Vivian did not expect that at the last moment of the Holy See's destruction, they would receive the support of the Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane. After all, there was only one main plane, but there were countless secondary planes like the Noah continent. Under normal circumstances, the main plane would not interfere in the struggle between the secondary planes. The reason was simple: they could not take care of all the secondary planes. To be able to send God's child before the Holy See's destruction, it was clear that the Legion of Holy Angels valued the Noah continent. The Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane was paying attention to the Noah continent. This was definitely not a good thing for the Scourge Church. Seeing the shocked expressions on everyone's faces, Rodewald's face showed a trace of satisfaction. "If you know what's good for you, then hurry up and surrender. The strength of the main plane's legion isn't something a tiny main plane like yours can contend with." "Is that so?" As soon as Rodewald's voice fell, Kay immediately followed up. He snorted coldly. "I'd like to see how strong you birdmen from the main plane are." Being called a birdman, even with Rodewald's self-restraint, he could not keep his cool. He was furious, but his eyes flashed and he said calmly, "That's really too bad." Roar. Kay roared and the muscles on his body made crackling sounds. At the same time, his body suddenly enlarged. In just a moment, he turned into a huge monster covered in golden hair. Golden Beaumont. Seeing Kay's sudden transformation, Rodewald frowned slightly. The giant beast in front of him was not an ordinary Beaumont, but a golden Beaumont with the noble bloodline of the Beaumont clan. According to legend, Beaumont giant beasts with the bloodline of the Beaumont clan were extremely rare. This golden-haired monster was born to be the king of the Beaumont clan. I thought it was some kind of magical beast. It's just a golden Beaumont. Although a golden Beaumont is very strong, it's obvious that you haven't mastered it yet." Rodewald sneered, his eyes full of disdain. He straightened his body slightly. This time, we came to the Noah continent's secondary plane only to settle the grudge between the Holy See and the Scourge Church from 100,000 years ago. Those who have nothing to do with it leave at once. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. I'll leave your mother. As soon as Rodewald's voice fell, Kay's anger exploded. She had already punched out. The powerful fist stirred up a strong wind, and Kay's huge fist was suffused with a trace of pale gold. Beaumont clan didn't have gorgeous magic or fighting aura. All they had was strength. Strength that could break through the sky. Rodewald sneered, as if he didn't put this golden Beaumont in front of him in his eyes at all. At this moment, a white light flashed in front of his eyes. A white figure could be seen blocking in front of Rodewald in an instant. In an instant, a defense was activated, and a faint curtain of light enveloped the angel. Boom! Kay's fist slammed into the holy angel's curtain of light, and a dazzling brilliance erupted. Kill! Kay's move was a signal. Several powerhouses of the Scourge Church roared in anger and rushed forward at the same time. The first battle between the Scourge Church and the Holy See had begun. Boom, boom, boom! In the sky and on the ground, powerful auras shrouded the entire space. The aftermath of the fierce battle between the powerhouses of the sacred domain spread out like a hurricane. Kay alone held back two angels. The two powerful angels were also in a deadlock when facing the powerful golden Beaumont. Celestial Wolf King Delin was fighting against an angel. The strength of a level 15 magical beast didn't put her at a disadvantage. The Earthen Bear, Coop, had already advanced to become a level 13 magical beast, the Earthen Violent Bear. His body was more than 10 times larger than before, and he was constantly roaring as he fought with an angel. In comparison, Grand Magus Necromancer Vivian was the weakest. She had just stepped into the sacred domain and hadn't fully grasped the power of the soul. The angels of the sacred domain countered all of her attacks in an instant. The arrival of the powerhouses of the Scourge Church boosted the morale of the soldiers. They roared and launched a counterattack against the army of holy angels. Abyssal skeletal dragon, Vivian chanted in a low voice. A huge abyssal skeletal dragon rushed out of the summoning array, roaring endlessly. Holy illumination. The angel of the sacred domain wasn't to be outdone. She raised her heavy one-handed scepter, and a holy light spilled out. It was as bright as the sun. Roar! The abyssal skeletal dragon summoned by Vivian let out a miserable howl. Under the illumination of the holy light, a large amount of green smoke came out of its body, as if it was being corroded. Vivian's expression changed greatly. In just an instant, the abyssal skeletal dragon she summoned was heavily injured, and its battle strength was greatly reduced. The female angel wouldn't let her off so easily. She waved her scepter and attacked Vivian, who had lost the protection of the abyssal skeletal dragon. Vivian's beautiful face turned pale, and she hurriedly retreated. You want to leave? Not so easy. The female angel's expression turned cold. The white wings on her back suddenly flapped, and a bright light appeared. She chased after Vivian. Rodewald stood in the sky with his hands behind his back, smiling coldly. From the beginning to the end, he hadn't made a move. To him, these powerhouses of the sacred domain didn't have the qualifications to make this angel guard captain make a move. Fist of Heaven! The female angel who was chasing after Vivian shouted. She raised her white hand, and a huge beam of light blasted towards Vivian. White Bone Shield. Vivian gritted her teeth and summoned a huge white bone shield in front of her. Boom! A dazzling white halo shook the surroundings. The powerful power of Guangming was like a gale. Wherever it went, the undead were all turned into ashes. This is too powerful. The soldiers of the Scourge Church were dumbfounded. The strength of the angel was far beyond their imagination. In their hearts, she was regarded as a god, a peerless genius second only to Ron. Necromancer Sacred Magus Vivian was actually sent flying by a single punch from the female angel. Chapter 670. Not far away, two figures of average height stood quietly in the void. They were a man and a woman, and their expressions were not very good. "It's the main battle army from the main plain." The one who spoke was a male old man. He was dressed in a black robe and had long, straight eyebrows. His expression was dignified without being angry. He was the chief of the dragons, a divine powerhouse, the dark dragon Ra Firth. Beside him stood Frigga. The Holy See is really influential to be able to invite the main battle army from the main plain, Frigga said in a low voice. She gritted her teeth. I really don't know why the high and mighty main plain would take a fancy to a small place like the Noah continent. Frigga turned her face. Chief, how should the council deal with this matter? Although Frigga was nominally the speaker and Ra Firth was the deputy speaker, this was only nominally. In reality, whether it was the council or the dragons, everything was decided by Ra Firth. Ra Firth was silent for a moment. There's no hurry. Let's wait and see. Firth looked into the distance, a trace of worry flashing in his eyes. What I'm most worried about is that the main battle army from the main plane of the undead is also involved in this war. If that's the case, the Noah continent will be in danger. 100,000 years ago, the legion of holy angels from the main plane of order and the scourge from the main plane of the undead had an earth-shattering battle on the Amros continent. The flames of war burned the entire continent, causing it to be on the verge of destruction. If the same thing happened on the Noah continent, Frigga pursed her lips. I believe that Lord Noah won't sit back and do nothing. As they spoke, dozens of streams of light flew from the far north, rushing in the direction of the battlefield. It's them, they're here, Frigga exclaimed. There was no mistaking it. The dozens of streaks of light in the distance were the divine angels that had descended from the mortal plane. Following behind them were the divine angel guard. They were advancing southward at an extremely fast speed. It was obvious that their purpose was to provide reinforcement. Frigga's expression changed. I'm afraid the Scourge Church is in trouble. Vivian struggled to get up from the ground. Wiping the blood from the corner of her mouth, she revealed a bitter smile. The difference in strength between her and her opponent was simply too great. At this moment, the angel had no intention of letting Vivian go. She raised her scepter, and a brilliant light erupted from her body, pressing down on Vivian. Lady Vivian! The soldiers of the Scourge Church felt their hearts clench. At this moment, Vivian was unable to dodge. Lin, Kay, and Coop were all held back by the angels and couldn't come to their aid. It's over! Vivian screamed and closed her eyes in despair. Whoosh! Just as the angel's scepter was about to smash down, an arrow suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It accurately shot into the angel's abdomen at an extremely tricky angle, causing blood to flow out. Everyone was stunned. Even the leader of the divine angel guards, Rodewald, put down his arms in front of his chest, his face full of shock. Others might not know, but Rodewald knew that it was extremely difficult to break through the divine blessing defense on an angel without a certain level of strength. The strength of the attacker was not to be underestimated. Who did it? Not only Rodewald, but even Vivian was curious. Who in the world had saved her at this critical moment? The female angel who was shot frowned. She reached out and pulled the arrow out of her abdomen. In an instant, the wound on her abdomen was as good as new. She narrowed her eyes and stared at a certain empty space in the sky, but there was nothing there. Come out! The female angel coldly shouted with a straight face. Her voice was so calm that it did not contain a trace of emotion. At this moment, the void throbbed, and a graceful dark green figure slowly appeared in the sky. Aurora! Vivian jumped in fright. The dark green figure in front of her was none other than the elven dark elf Aurora. Aurora was quietly floating in the air with a pair of translucent snow-white wings behind her back. She held a dark green longbow in her hand and wore elven light armor that exposed her arms and legs. She wore a pair of boots that covered her knees. Her dark gray skin and long ears were gently shaking. Dark elves were born with the ability to hide. If not for the female angel's shout, Vivian would not have been able to discover her existence. Vivian's heart was filled with shock. She was shocked by Aurora's strength. At this moment, Aurora was no longer a master archer, but a true powerhouse of the sacred domain. She was an elven archer with excellent archery skills. Aurora quietly stood in the air, coldly confronting the female angel. This arrow did not hit any vital point. Her goal was only to warn her. Elf, why are you interfering in the matter between us and the Scourge Church? At this moment, the female angel spoke. She only wanted to say that this matter had nothing to do with elves. However, her tone was full of arrogance, which made others feel uncomfortable. Aurora raised her eyebrows and replied, not to be outdone, "Aren't you also interfering in the matter between the Scourge Church and the Holy See? You're courting death." After a simple question and answer, the female angel was clearly enraged. She no longer intended to talk nonsense with the other party. She waved her scepter and suddenly attacked Aurora. Triple arrow! Aurora shouted. Her fingers moved quickly on the bowstring, making z-chen-ji sounds. As the bowstring flashed, a black shadow could be seen flying towards the female angel. Although Aurora had been promoted to an archer saint, her skill was just a simple arrow. It did not have much power. However, the female angel fighting her did not dare to lower her guard. This was because all the strength of an archer was concentrated on that arrow. Don't look at how light and weak the arrow was. If it hit a vital point, it would result in death. The archer profession seemed to be tailor-made for the elves. Their high attack and dexterity were already a headache. On top of that, dark elves were born with the innate talent of invisibility. They were definitely worthy of being called the king of assassins. Z-Chen-ji. Aurora constantly changed her figure and fought with the female angel. She displayed the high dexterity of the dark elf. Guided arrow. Frozen arrow. Multiple arrow. Boom. 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 Countless explosions sounded. It was like a cat chasing a mouse. Wherever Aurora's figure appeared, the female angel would chase after her. The two of them chased after each other. Wherever they went, there would be waves of energy. No matter how the female angel chased, the elven archer Saint Aurora always maintained a certain distance from her. Her hands did not stop moving, shooting out all kinds of arrows at the female angel. There was a name for this technique in the archery world. It was called kiting. It was a high-end technique that only allowed the user to hit others and not let others hit the user. Although the user knew the method, it was not easy to do it. Amazing, really too amazing. Vivian could not suppress the shock in her heart. Aurora's strength had far exceeded her expectations. She did not expect her strength to have taken a qualitative leap after advancing to the sacred domain. Boom! With a loud explosion, the fierce battle finally stopped. The two figures appeared one after the other. This time, it was obvious who had the upper hand. Aurora was still holding her longbow, the bowstring still trembling. She looked calm and composed, and there was not a single injury on her body. The female angel with the scepter was not so lucky. Her hair was messy, and she was gasping for breath. Her blue eyes were bloodshot, and she looked very ferocious. There was a small arrow stuck in her exposed shoulder, and blood was flowing out of the wound. This arrow was very small and did not look very conspicuous. It was far less serious than the female angel's injury. The female angel took a few deep breaths and glared at Aurora. Her eyes were filled with resentment. Chapter 671. Aurora stood there casually, neither admitting nor denying. She only smiled faintly, her eyes full of provocation. Smearing poison on the arrow was not a difficult task. The poison she smeared on the arrow was not a fatal poison. It was only used to slow down the enemy's speed. Even so, it was not easy to expel this kind of poison. The female angel tried for a while, but found that it was difficult to expel the poison. Her expression turned ugly. Damn it! The angel guard Captain Rodewald could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He put down his hands. Now, he was going to personally take action. From the beginning to the end, Rodewald had not personally taken action. There were not many people in this secondary plane who were worth his time. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, dozens of figures suddenly appeared out of thin air, arriving in front of Rodewald. The reinforcements of the Divine Angel Guard Legion had arrived first. Dozens of angels filled the entire sky. All of them were tall and sturdy. The men were extremely handsome, and the women were extremely beautiful. Their entire bodies were filled with a sacred and solemn aura. A pair of beautiful white wings gently flapped on their back. From afar, it looked like a large group of birds flying. Not good. Vivian's heart sank. This is troublesome. There were dozens of angels. Even though their strength varied, every single one of them was at the saint level. One could imagine how difficult it would be for any of them to face dozens of saint-level experts at the same time. Everyone in the Calamity Church was stupefied by the appearance of dozens of angels. Even Kay stopped what he was doing. He gasped as he looked at the sky filled with fluttering white wings. What do we do? The appearance of dozens of angels caused everyone in the Scourge Church to turn pale. The powerhouses of the primary plane might not be stronger than them, but their numbers were terrifying. In the entire Noah continent, there were no more than 200 sacred domain powerhouses. A quarter of the sacred domain angels were here, and these angels were only one of God's child Andrew's guards. The leader was a handsome male angel. He seemed to have seen through Rodewald's plan and said, "Lord Rodewald, leave this to me. There's no need to trouble you with such a small matter." The male angel casually swept his gaze around and understood the general situation. The Scourge Church only had a few sacred domain powerhouses. He did not care about this little bit of strength. To him, mobilizing so many angels at once was making a mountain out of a molehill. Rodewald was a very lazy person. If it was not necessary, he would not take the initiative. Seeing his subordinate took the initiative to take care of this matter, he nodded in satisfaction and softly nodded. "Let's end this quickly. Don't let Lord Andrew wait for too long. Once we're done, we'll return to the primary plane as soon as possible." He did not want to stay in this small secondary plane for even a moment longer. "Yes, Lord Rodewald." The handsome male angel smiled. He knew that Lord Andrew's mission from the primary plane was to eliminate the evil here. He wanted to eliminate the power of the undead from the Noah continent and turn this place into the backyard of the Legion of Holy Angels. Therefore, Andrew could not let the Scourge Church go. What he wanted to do was to repeat what his father did 100,000 years ago. 100,000 years ago, the Scourge Church had the support of the Lich King, but now it was gone. "Vivian, what should we do?" Lynn, Kay, Cooper, Aurora, and the others had already retreated to Vivian's side. Lynn asked. Her face was pale, and her voice was trembling. The sudden appearance of dozens of sacred domain powerhouses had frightened everyone. Those who had not personally experienced it would not know what it felt like to be stared at by dozens of sacred domain powerhouses. Vivian clenched her teeth, her body trembling. In the face of absolute power, what could she do? She could not even defeat a single sacred domain angel, let alone so many sacred domain angels. The difference in power was too great. It was so great that she felt despair. "Let's fight to the death." Vivian took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. She knew that even if she gave the order to retreat, the result would not change. These angels' goal was to destroy the Scourge Church. Where could they retreat to? Since that was the case, they might as well fight to the death. Yes, let's fight to the death, Kay roared. He had nowhere to vent his hot-bloodedness. To him, it did not matter how many angels there were. Delin also thought of this and sighed. She knew that there was no way out. Let's fight to the death. Delin's eyes flashed. When she was first involved in the conflict between the Scourge Church and the Holy See, she had already thought of this. This was also the reason why she left the Thousand Illusion Ice Wolf clan alone and came to the Scourge Church. Aurora's eyes were cold. Even in the face of such a terrible situation, she had no intention of retreating. Form the Angel Battle formation immediately. Rodewald could no longer remain calm. He gave the order to attack. Yes. The handsome male angel replied loudly. The dozens of angels seemed to have a tacit understanding. They formed a strange formation. A faint light constantly circulated, linking the power of the dozens of angels. Kill! The male angel roared. The dozens of angels attacked at the same time. An intense light shone in all directions. The light circulated. At this moment, a pillar of light shot out from the body of an angel, followed by a second, then a third. The power of the dozens of angels condensed into a single point, forming a white sphere that emitted a holy light. This white sphere spun continuously, growing bigger and bigger until it was as bright as the sun. Rodewald smiled. The combined power of the dozens of angels launched a brazen attack. This was the power of the Angel Battle formation. Under the effect of the powerful light sphere, anything that stood in its way would be reduced to ashes in an instant. At this moment, the light sphere had finished accumulating. Following Rodewald's order, the light sphere suddenly blasted towards Vivian and the others. It's coming! Vivian and the others were pale with fright. The dozens of angels attacked at the same time, surrounding them from all directions. There was no way to avoid the attack except to block it head-on. White Bone Shield. Defensive Stance. Ice Shield. Earth Guard. The 5 sacred domain powerhouses activated their strongest defenses. Although they knew that such resistance was futile, some of them even closed their eyes in despair. The light sphere's power was too great. The air seemed to be burning, and the entire ground was overshadowed by this powerful light sphere. Just as everyone closed their eyes and waited for death, a sudden change occurred. Where the 5 sacred domain powerhouses of the Scourge Church were standing, the black soil quickly hardened as if it had a mind of its own. A huge black fog instantly spread out. Car, the sound of something growing could be heard. Huge, white bones suddenly extended from the ground and extended into the air, enveloping everyone like a huge cage. Boom! The ball of light finally hit the cage, made up of bones, and exploded with a deafening sound. With the cage as the center, a powerful light energy spread out in all directions, flattening everything in the surroundings. Boom, boom, boom! The huge momentum shook the heavens and the earth. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at all this. Heavens! Could there be any living thing in the center of this explosion that could survive? If there was, it would definitely be a miracle. Ha ha! Rodewald looked at all of this with satisfaction. He liked the feeling of dealing with his opponent cleanly and without any hesitation. He believed that Prince Andrew would want him to do the same. As long as these sacred domain powerhouses were killed, the Scourge Church would be like a toothless tiger. It was only a matter of time before it was destroyed. The smoke gradually dissipated, revealing the scene inside. According to Rodewald's estimation, the few sanctuary powerhouses had long been blasted to the point that there was nothing left of them. However, what happened next gave him a huge shock. What? How is this possible? Rodewald's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He saw a huge skeleton standing between the heavens and the earth. It was as tall as a small mountain, but the difference was that this skeleton only had half a body. It had one of its hands together, protecting the 5 people in front of it. The dozens of light beams just now couldn't shake it at all. What's going on? It wasn't just Rodewald. Even Vivian was shocked by the scene in front of her. She didn't even know when the huge skeleton had appeared. What a powerful defensive method! Rodewald sucked in a breath of cold air. He already knew that the huge skeleton in front of him couldn't have been released by the sacred domain powerhouses. There was someone else who could release this huge skeleton and block the attacks of the angels. Rodewald looked around. In just an instant, he saw a black figure not far away in the sky. He immediately felt as if he had been struck by lightning. It was an old man with white eyebrows and a beard. He was dressed in a black robe and was as thin as a bamboo pole. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away. Rodewald looked at the other party, and the other party's gaze happened to meet his, causing Rodewald to involuntarily shiver. A God-realm powerhouse. Rodewald came to this conclusion in an instant. Although they hadn't fought yet, the peerless power emanating from the other party couldn't be fake. The other party was undoubtedly a God-realm powerhouse. Rodewald's heart sank. If the other party was really a God-realm powerhouse, then the angel battle formation was completely useless against him. Even if it was, it wouldn't have much of an effect. Great Elder! Vivian also recognized the person who had come and cheered. Who else could it be but Great Elder Homelin? At the critical moment, Homelin rushed to the battlefield and cast the God-realm necromancy spell, Death Protection, to protect everyone. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.